All right. Well, ever since the dawn of history, humanity has wondered where we go after death. But for many, the belief was those who died were obviously those who were first to know, and that those of the dead who happened to be one's own family members would in some way retain aspects of that same relationship, the same kinship values, and the same loyalties with those of the same blood as they did in life. Because of this conviction, these ancestors were believed to stand in positions to act as intercessors between the world of the living and the world of the dead. They are able to hear special requests and possibly even to answer them from their now heightened positions on the other side. But they also had to be honored for who they were, and in some cases kept alive and strong in this realm of the dead with all kinds of offerings. So today we're going to be talking about ancestor worship, or we could use the word, the phrase ancestor veneration. It kind of goes both ways, right? So some people go, "Ooh, ancestor worship. What is that about?" So what does that mean? What's the definition? So we got to start off with definitions, because otherwise we're going to get lost. There's so many places we could go. Okay, so according to Matsumoto, he says ancestors are the dead members of society who are remembered and venerated as the source of entitlement and or identity by their descendants, periodically or intermittently, through active lines of communication, usually in the form of rituals and sacralization of places. So that's the official definition. Not too exciting, but got to start somewhere. Because of this, ancestorhood is rather a sort of status to be gained from a transformative process of making the ancestors of the dead appropriate through various protocols to the living. So it's not, even though you have this idea that all those who pass on, they're all ancestors. Yes, that's true, but in most societies, there's a qualification, right? It's certain ancestors. It's certain lines. It's those who seem to deserve a special status, okay? And then, of course, there happens to be those who are the other, and the other, we'll talk about the other in a little bit. Sometimes they're called hungry ghosts in some societies. They're called all different kinds of names. We'll go there, don't worry, soon. Okay, so moving right along, right? Now, from what we can find from the material evidence, ancestor worship appears to be one of the earliest forms of religion, linked very closely to ancient animism, where ancient human beings began to speculate what happened to their family members after they crossed on, believing since they were related to them by blood and kinship affiliations, that whatever transpired on the other side of all the spirits, they could be closer to them. And so what is the earliest evidence, however? The earliest evidence of ancestor veneration happens to be, well, I like this example. It's those known as the Natufians. The Natufians. Now, I love talking about Natufians. Natufians are these really ancient peoples that occupied much of the ancient Middle East, going back to 13,000 BCE all the way to 8,000 BCE. They're known for the city of Jericho, for example, one of the earliest cities that we know of. And they have a very interesting way of veneration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the evidence for it, and then you can see for yourself that it connects to ancestor veneration. So you go to a Natufian town, for example, Jericho, and you realize that what they would do is that the huts are circular to a certain extent around. And what they would do is when you walk in to the front entryway, in the middle of that particular hut, there was a small little platform, a little podium that's painted with red ochre paint. And on that red ochre painted podium, there was a skull. That skull, what they did is they removed the jaw so it would face forward directly towards or out towards the entrance exit of the particular hut or the building. And so that means that the first thing that you would see when entering into this home was a image of a skull looking at you. What they did with the skull is they painted it over, they plastered it over, they put seashells in for the eyes, yeah, so it looked like it was living again, so to speak. Right now, what's interesting about this is that it turned out that what they would do, because we analyzed these skulls, and they had bird peck marks on it. And then we looked further, and we realized that, well, there's a bunch of headless bodies underneath the house. Okay. We also noticed that on the perimeter, there's a series of skulls that are facing outwards, as if protecting this home, this domestic space. So what exactly is going on here? Well, of course, taking a look, it turns out that they're all related. So how does this work, right? So basically what happens is this, is that you're going to have Grandpa, and Grandpa passes away. And Grandpa is then placed outside, and he receives what's called excarnation. And that what happens there is that the birds come about and they peck away, they clean off the flesh off the body, and so it becomes skeletalized. We know they did that because we see the bird peck marks literally in the bones. After clearing that, they take Grandpa's head off and they put it onto that small podium in the middle of the hut. And then they bury his headless body underneath the floor. Then what happens is that later on, is that let's just say Grandma passes away. So what they'll do is they'll do the same process. Her body will skeletalize through excarnation outside. The birds will clean it all off. And then they'll take her body, they'll bury it under the floor. But what do they do with her head? Well, what they do is kind of like tire rotation. So what they do is they replace Grandpa's head, I'm like Indiana Jones, right, with Grandma's head, and place that on the small red podium. And they take Grandpa's head and then they put that on the periphery, on the boundary, outside boundary of the hut. And so you have this interesting exchange. So that means the most recently deceased person happens to be the skull that is in the middle of this hut, and it goes like that. So the most recently dead, the most recent ancestor is there to watch over the house. And since it's looking at that front doorway, in a sense, it is protecting the house, that domestic space. I find that extremely fascinating. That's the Natufian civilization. So that's one of their, again, this is definitely ancestor veneration, but at the same time, you could see just by looking at the material culture, there's this idea of protection. They are watching, they're protecting the home. And, I know we think to ourselves, ooh, you're burying something in your house, but you have to understand their point of view. Their point of view is, hey, we keep our family with us, the bones of our ancestors, in this place of residence makes it even more home. This is the place of the heart. This is the place of the heart of who we are. And our legacy is found. It is found beneath the house. Of course, when you have the skulls looking outside, you can see there's still that legacy of watching. The ancestors are watching after us. Now, this kind of thing continued on. Chatohuyak had the same kind of idea. Once again, what do? Is you bury your family members under your house. It's part of your home. So this practice was not just the Natufians. This will be continued on with Chatohuyak, as well as other civilizations throughout the ancient East, as well as Anatolia. Again, I find that pretty interesting. That goes back a long ways. So let's move into Mesopotamia. So what was ancestor veneration like for them? Now what happened is that for the Sumerians and the Babylonians, the dead in general went to the underworld. Often this place is called Gidom. Here the dead resided in darkness. It's really not a great place. I mean, they're eating dust and ashes and scraps. Now, in order to keep your ancestors alive, both in soul and body, the loved ones had to feed them via the grave site, right? And in fact, how they did that is fascinating and leads to a practice that continues beyond the Mesopotamian civilization and even into the Greeks as well as the Romans. What they would do is they would feed them directly by pouring the offerings via what is known as a libation pipe, which are discovered in many of these ancient graves. So what happens is that literally they pour a libation. It goes into this little pipe, and it goes into, down below, to the ashes, or if it's inhumation, to the body. And so literally through this tube, you're feeding it. You're feeding it the wine, whatever you want to give it. It's a direct connection. So we have found this in an archaeological sense. We also have found references to this in various inscriptions. One says as follows. It says, "On this day, stand before the god Samos and Gilgamesh." These are, of course, obviously gods of the underworld. "I will pour cool water down your water pipes. Cure me that I may sing your praises." That's an important inscription. So I will pour cool water down your water pipes. So there's so in this case it's not wine, it's water to refresh the bones or the ashes. It can go both ways. But there's a request made. The request is, cure me that I may sing your praises. So it's if I do this for you, it's kind of a contract. You're going to do this for me. If I am going to give you this libation, then you're going to cure me. But I give you something back. What's going to be given back? I'm going to sing. I'm going to sing your praises. I'm going to celebrate you, remember you. You get a ceremony. You get a ritual. You get recognition. You get remembrance. That's what the ancestors want. And so right away, you see this contract. Well, of course, by the way, Samos, this is known also by the Sumerians as Utu. This is the god of the sun, with his light causing the crops to grow. And now in connection to the underworld, because the spirits of the dead were believed to enter the abode of darkness through a passageway located on the horizon in the extreme western part of the world. Many believe that this was the very same entrance leading to Samos's underground dwelling, the place where he resided at sunset each evening. So for the Sumerians and the Babylonians, and guess what? You do go off riding or floating into the sunset. Like an old Western, right? You're going to the sunset, the horizon, into the underworld. So that's where Samos is. Okay. Of course, one can always withhold such libations to punish the dead. It worked the other way, right? So there's another literary reference to this stating may Samas himself never let the pipe for him receive cool water down below into the netherworld. Oh man! So this person's obviously mad at this ancestor, as he's refusing to give them any kind of libation. There's even a more threatening one that goes as follows. Now, you know who Samos is, so he's the sun, but he moves into the rise into the underworld. It says, may Samos uproot him from the land of the living and leave his ghost to thirst for water in the world below. Ooh, wow. Okay. So you could see there's not always a great love for those who have passed on, or it could be the person did offer some kind of libation, and they expected that they're going to receive something in return, and they didn't, and they're mad about it. So no more water for you. Now, in some cases, we're reading here it's water, but it can be water, and then it can also be wine. Okay, now there's a Sumerian temple that has hymns dedicated to Enegi. And it mentions it, Enegi, as Enegi, of course, is a city. And they refer to this city as a big pipe of Ereshkigal's underworld. And it's like, what? So this city is looked at, Enegi is looked at as a giant pipe to the underworld. So now, Enegi, this city was sacred to Nanuza, who is the god of the underworld, and he was declared as the steward of the underworld and king of the snakes. Now, Nenezu is linked to the cycles of vegetation and agriculture, and so is one of the dying and returning gods. Here, the city of Enegi and Nanuza are seen as one, and so here, this god becomes understood as the one who metaphysically feeds the ancestors through his pipe in the underworld. As somebody just said, you mean an entire Goth city? Yeah. Yes. So in a sense, right, where the actual clay pipes end on the bones or ashes of the deceased, it is then carried further down by this god into the underworld to feed them. So you have the actual little pipe that goes to the ashes, and then through this god, through Nanuza, there is another metaphysical pipe that continues on into the underworld. And so, good news, right? You know, I know you're thinking to yourself, you have your pipe, and you're thinking it's not long enough to go to the underworld. Don't worry, just has to get to the bones or the ashes, and then Nanuza will take it the rest of the way down to feed the dead so that they can be strong. That is, if you like them. And of course, as long as you remember them, they will still be alive. Now, of course, if you did not receive a proper burial, you suffered even worse in the underworld. The worst fate waited for those whose body was burned so they could not be buried. There's one inscription that says, his spirit is not in the underworld. His smoke went up to the sky, unquote. Well, that's pretty depressing. So, yeah. So, Mesopotamian civilization, again, the idea of the pipes, again, that will be used in other places. Now, ancient Israel, I'm just going to mention this in passing. There is remnants of references to ancestor worship or cults within the Bible. Although, of course, as you may figure out, those who are part of the temple worship dedicated to El or Yahweh were not exactly in favor of it. But what happened is, in fact, and that is because the God of Israel and the ancestral cults had the main objective of enforcing the idea of continued family lines, right? And so for the ancestor cult, in order to be remembered and strengthened from rituals made by the descendants to keep them alive in the underworld, for them, this created a cohesion with family. It kept a cohesion with kin, with relations. But guess what? Isn't that what the God of Israel is wanting to do? That it is the people of Israel, right? And God's chosen people. And so what will happen is ancestor veneration that was popular throughout throughout Palestine and other places, Canaan. What's going to happen is there's going to be this conflict of interest, where God on one side is supposedly saying, you don't venerate the ancestors for family cohesion. You honor me, and of course the competition. Now, what I find is interesting, the reason why I bring this up is you take a look in the Bible, it mentions those who are called the Ob. And the word is also related to the Ugaritic word Ub, which is translated as God Father. But it is better translated as ancestor. Okay, although you would, of course, obviously the Ab and Ab, does connect to the word father. So it turns out that if you look at the Bible, when it refers to necromancy, it's really referring to this ancestral cult that is being prohibited. So the idea is necromancy is bringing back the dead to life, but in the context of understanding the language, it really refers to the idea that there's a prohibition against ancestor veneration, where various rituals are conducted to bring the ancestors back to life for advice and for deals and for contracts. Isn't that fascinating? But it doesn't get into any translations. It gets in. It's just in the Hebrew. There you have it. So it's kind of fun. The Egyptians. For the Egyptians, they love their culture. They love their religion. They love their daily lives. In fact, they loved their lives so much that they wanted it to just not stop. They wanted the story never to end, to actually continue. So tombs became housing for those in the hereafter. And so they were carefully constructed and decorated, just as homes for the living were. As many of you know, mummification was a way to preserve the corpse so that the ka, which is with the soul of the deceased, could return to receive offerings of the things that she or he enjoyed while alive. Of course, it does kind of get more complicated when it comes to the idea of the Egyptian soul, because, you basically have the Ba, which is the personality, and the Ka, which is the vital spirit, and they kind of come together and they form what's called the Ak. But we'll go there in a few moments. So what happens is this: if mummification was not affordable, if you can't afford it, a Ka statue was created in the likeness of the deceased. It was carved especially for this purpose. Now, again, as I mentioned, if you put the Ba and the Ka together, you collectively have what's called the Ak, or if you want to say Aku, you can. These, of course, Aku, which basically, this is the plural, it means the shining ones. So the Ak or the Aku, these are the shining ones. Those are the ancestors. They were described as shining as gold in the belly of Nut, and were indeed depicted as golden stars on the roofs of many tombs and temples. Isn't that beautiful? So Nut, of course, obviously the goddess of the sky, overarching there. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, you wish upon a star, right? So the conceptual idea of the stars as being souls. Now, here we go. The process by which a Ka meets together with a Ba, it becomes becoming an Ak, is not automatic upon death. It involves a 70-day journey through the underworld, through duet. So there is this little process there of change. So what happens there is as follows. basically, after the 70 days, you go to a judgment before Osiris. I should have brought my Osiris image, Lord of the Dead, where the Ka's heart would be weighed on a scale against the feather of Mot, representing truth. However, if the Ka was not properly prepared, this journey could be full of dangerous pitfalls and strange demons. And so, you got to figure out how to navigate, how to be guided through the underworld. And there are texts that were prepared for this. Now, if the heart wasn't balanced with the feather of Mot, the Ka passed judgment and was granted access to the beautiful West as an Ak, and who was also the Maharu, which is a true voice to dwell amongst the gods and the other Aku. At this point only, the Ka was deemed worthy to be venerated by the living through rites and offerings. So you're going to have to go through a 70-day process before you get to the point where you can venerate them. It has to get through the underworld. It has to go through all these challenges. It has to get to the weighing of the heart ceremony before Osiris. Only then will the ancestor veneration begin. I want to bring that up because there's lots of similarities with that with other world religions, right? Of wandering in the underworld, and then, of course, going to a special place. Okay, now, those who became lost in duet or to deliberately try to avoid judgment became the unfortunate. They became the dangerous. They became the Matu. They became the other, the restless dead. Now, for a few whose evil hearts outweighed the feather, the goddess Amit waited patiently behind Osiris's judgment to consume them. So you get omitted, or maybe omitted, right, by Amit, if you are considered bad or evil. If you are, as opposed to being lighthearted, you are heavy-hearted. Your heart is not light as a feather. And so, Amit, it looks like kind of a hippopotamus mixed with a crocodile and a lion. It's pretty ferocious, right? So, yeah. You are, in a sense, interestingly enough, unmade. There's this idea of the eternal void, unmade. Now, of course, what happens if you're not venerated, but you're not evil? What happens then? Well, if you're forgotten, then you become restless, dead, and you kind of float around. You're almost like a hungry ghost in many ways. So it's important to always remember your loved ones, to always perform prayers and give offerings at the person's tomb. And so we have some tomb inscriptions that are fascinating. Some of these tomb inscriptions actually invite passerbyers to speak aloud their names of the deceased. So what happens is you're passing by a tomb and you take a look and it says their name, and you're supposed to say that name. And by saying that name, it empowers that spirit to continue on. It's just a nice thing to do, right? So, by the way, because it gets more complicated, you see, amongst the Egyptians, of course, you have the Ka, which is the vital spirit, and you have the Ba, which is the personality, and the Ba and Ka come together and become the Ak. The Ba, by the way, kind of connects the body with the spirit, going back and forth. But anyway, but you also have the Shut, which is the shadow oneself, but you also have the Ren, which is the name. And then your name, your special name, is important. It's sacred. And so what they will do, even in life, you have to protect that name in life. And so if it's written down on an inscription, you have a cartouche around it, which is a sacred boundary that protects the name from any kind of evil. Because what will happen is if somebody gets your name, they could be using it for all kinds of terrible things or oppress you. So always protect your name. But in death, when death comes about you, the idea is polite. If you want to keep their memory alive, to keep them alive, to go around and say their names. In fact, as I said before, inscriptions are please say my name. I kind of thought about this just a little bit. And I thought to myself, I don't want to call the wrong names, but if I'm walking through a cemetery, it's almost tempting if you to look at some of the tombs, and if you feel like that person maybe is a good person, I don't know, maybe go ahead and say your name, right? Say Allie, or say Julian, or say the name, right? Does that make sense? And that gives that person some energy to keep going on, because after all, ancestors want to be remembered, and if we remember them, then of course they'll give us things in return. It's kind of nice, maybe, I don't know, or morbid. I don't know, depends on your perspective, right? But there you have it. And also, if you go by a tomb, you offer water and prayers, right? Now, in the private homes of the less wealthy, niches were carved into the walls for the purpose of housing the images of the family aku, and to serve as altars of veneration. So you have representations of that. So you have, and you can see this idea of an ancestor altar that is in a large portion of cultures. Egypt is just one of so many. All right, so let's move on to the Indo-Europeans. Those who are migrating from the Caucasus across Europe. So they also have an ancestral veneration that crosses over. That will, of course, obviously, Indo-Europeans will become the Greeks, and then the Romans, and anybody who's Latin, anybody who is Germanic, anybody who's Slavic. I mean, Celts, right? They're all Indo-Europeans. And so what happens is that they have an ancestor veneration that is based upon, again, family identity. But what I find is interesting here is that family is not just mom and dad, brother, sister, the dog, the cat, maybe, I don't know. It is also includes beyond those of blood. It includes servants. It includes slaves. It includes bondsmen. It includes retainers, as well as freemen who voluntarily place themselves in the service and protection of the family. So it's a larger idea of those, right? And so what will happen here is the family had a hierarchical structure. Unlike the egalitarian societies that they supplanted, the Indo-Europeans were patriarchal. And so you had the head of the family, who the Romans will understand as the paterfamilias, and he is in charge of the political, economic, and social aspects of the family. He was the dictator, so to speak, right? So the tradition was that each family could trace its ancestors back to a single founder. They're very much into a founder conception. The bones of the founder were said to be buried beneath the family hearth. So, of course, that becomes complicated, because if you're moving along, you have to exhume those bones or whatever's left. And when you go to the next location, then you place those bones or those remnants in the hearth of the next location. This hearth, in turn, was the main focus of religious worship. A sacred fire was intended to be burned in the hearth. The flame, theoretically, was never permitted to be extinguished, but of course that led to lots of fires. so it's not a great ideal, but as much as possible, you keep the fire going. What I find is interesting is that there's evidence that while the paterfamilias, or I'm using the Latin, but it goes back to the Indo-European, the father, or I should say, not really the father, it's the oldest male relative of that family. But when it comes to tending the hearth, that oftentimes went to the materfamilias. It often went to the head lady of the home. So she is the one who tended the hearth. I find that interesting, right? Now, when it comes to celebrating the memories of your ancestors at the hearth where the founders' remnants are placed, How do you do that beyond prayers? And well, you do that through a communal meal, which is attended by all the family. So now you have this idea of this family meal in dedication to the dead of the ancestors. And that runs right through the Indo-European system. And I find that really interesting. Okay, now let's go on to, of course, amongst the Greeks, this is the origins of the hero cult, which is a whole nother talk that I've done. So I'm not going to spend time on that. That would be another suggested idea. But let's talk about the Romans. Burial rituals differed in different ways in ancient Rome. It depended upon, of course, one's class and wealth. For the Romans, ancestor veneration was a fundamental part of their beliefs, as well as the household guardian spirits that were believed to protect them. Each home typically had some kind of household shrine that was called a lares. Lares being the guardian ancestors of the home. Again, I find this interesting because in belief systems all around the world, go moving into sub-Saharan Africa or India or East Asia, wherever it may be, there always seems to be an altar dedicated to the ancestors in the home. Anyway, the word lares itself derives from an Etruscan word, lar, or larth, meaning lord, since they were believed to oversee various locations and protect them, whether it be the home or a road or river, a mountain, a territory in general. I mean, you had even layers, at street corners. That layer is taking care of both these streets. So you want to make sure you venerate them, or you're going to trip and fall. your ox cart's going to run over you. So okay, sometimes Romans referred to the deceased heroes as lars as well as good spirits, and they would sometimes use the word for these good spirits, daemon, not to be confused with demon, although that's a whole other talk too. So the Roman playwright Plautus specifically mentioned a lar familiaris as a guardian spirit who protected the family's treasures. So family's treasures were also watched after. Anyway, but the lares is inclusive of the ancestors. Now, in humble households, small lar statuettes were often positioned upon a tile projecting from a wall niche. In most homes, at least one of the lares from its sacred enclosure was brought to observe family meals so as to secure the health of those eating the food. So what will happen is you want to make sure you have a good meal. You take one of the guardian spirits or an ancestor, preferably one who's a good cook, right, in the past, and you take that and you put that as you cook in the kitchen, and then, of course, in your triclinium. Doesn't sound right, but in the dining room, you put it there, and it watches after you. It watches, making sure that you're going to eat the food well, digest it well, have a good time. The lares not only protected the household, but also protected the ancestral legacy. Yes, they protected the spirit of the ancestors. As for those who are wealthier, each prominent family home possessed a more elaborate place set aside for venerating the lares. Often having a shrine or even an entire altar here in close proximity to the lares were dedication to the household ancestors, complete with waxen masks. Yes, waxen masks made in their appearance and inscriptions listing their various accomplishments, inclusive of public offices if held. We'll talk more about that in a few seconds. But I want to tell you this, that these more elaborate altars will include death masks, waxen masks of those who died, and paterfamiliae, and it's placed in storage in the altar, along with a list of their achievements, which we'll see how it's venerated in a few moments. Now, the paterfamilias, as I mentioned before, is the oldest male relative of the Roman home, but of course this goes back to the Indo-Europeans, as we discussed. He was also the high priest of the family cult. For while he was honored as the final decision maker, he himself bowed to the authority of his ancestors, who were ultimately in control and kept away the family evil spirits as well. I mean, the paterfamilias really did have the ultimate power. Did you know that when a baby is born in the household, there's a woman in the household whose family baby is born? Did you realize that they'll take the baby with the umbilical cord not cut yet and place the baby on the ground? That seems kind of dirty. Ooh. And they ask the paterfamilias to walk in. If he does not pick up the baby, that baby is not part of the family, and it's taken care of. It's exposed or given away or sold. So paterfamilias really had the power of life and death. Did you guys know that as long as the paterfamilias is alive, because he's the oldest male, everything really theoretically he owns. So you think if you're a son, you think you have your own land, but many of a paterfamiliae get themselves in trouble with debt, maybe gambling debts, and they sell off their son's property, and they can do so. That's probably why patricide was looked down so much in ancient Rome. So they have this power. Where did they get this power from? Well, of course, it does come from the ancestors. Where it comes from is the paterfamilias received from his family line, which is called his genius. So when the oldest, so basically, this is the spirit of inspirational wisdom. This is the spirit of guidance. This is the spirit of procreative potency. And it fell upon each subsequent male head of the household, generation upon generation. And so what happens is when the oldest male relative dies, that genius, that spirit, then moves from him and enters into the next oldest male relative. And it goes from relative to relative. It's all relative to me, right? And for the Romans, it certainly was, right? Okay, so they depicted this genius as in artwork as a man in a toga with a covered head or in the form of a snake, and this will appear on the altar. Okay, so that means that also at the ancestral altar dedicated to the lairs, the spirits, you also have those, they're actually worshiping the spirit of the paterfamilias as well, and of paterfamilia in general. Wow. Okay, so what happens now, right? So the recording of the life of each successive ancestor occurred at the funerals. So what happened is special speeches full of praise were written and delivered for the deceased on these occasions. And then what they would do is they preserved them and deposited them in the household ancestral shrine. Also, during these funerals, this is where it gets really cool. Wait this, right? The ancestral masks were brought out, and they were worn by actors, and they can't afford it, worn by various members of the family at the funeral. In fact, what they will do is they'll have a procession. And of course, in that procession, you'll have those wearing the masks of the ancestors going all the way back. So as they're going to the place of burial, to the funeral pyre, I should say, you're going to see the ancestors, in a sense, parading before you, holding torches, and you'll see exactly what they look like because they are waxen masks of their faces. Isn't that great? Literally marching down. And at these funerals, sometimes they will read even the earlier stories of the ancestors that were preserved in the same cabinet. Wow, that's pretty amazing. And that obviously Romans had a very deep-seated idea of history, especially family history, and deeply enveloped within their ancestor veneration. Now, certain days were designed to honor the graves of the deceased. Initially, what occurred is what's called the 9 days of sorrow, which were observed after the person's death. If the body was cremated, the flames were doused with water or wine, and so the ashes needed to dry. You got to dry those ashes. So during this time, when the bodies, The ashes are drying. There's a time of observance. Okay, so what will happen is there will be a sacrifice to the deceased, and various sacrifices over this period of time of mourning. After the 9 days of ritual mourning is concluded, if the person happened to be a spouse of the deceased or a direct family member, such as a son or daughter, they were to remain mourning for the next 10 months. That's a long time. So you're thinking, okay, so we're done with them, right? No, because there's another ritual done for those who are deceased. You got to celebrate their birthday, of course, after they have parted. The dies natalis, right, was always revered, and and so what happened is that during that period of time, you go out to the tomb and celebrate their birthday. That's kind of nice, right? So you got to remember that. Oftentimes, what they will do is they'll go by the tomb site and they'll have a meal. Often, and typically foods, their favorite foods, with that meal. Yeah, okay. So then, also, there's even another celebration to the ancestors. I'm telling you, the Romans are really into this. On between February 13th to the 21st, and it's called Paternalia. And of course, during this period of time, you got to go, especially to your parents, visit your parents. So you get to visit them on your birthday, and then you got to visit them on this day of the Parentalia. It is a great festival, and it ends with the Rosalia, right? Of course, not all the days of the dead are good. You have, of course, you're going to like this a lot, maybe too much. You're going to have what's called a Lemuria. And you're wondering when Lemuria is celebrated. Well, it's celebrated on May 9th, May 11th, and May 13th. Welcome to Lemuria. That's right. Today happens to be, I believe, it's May 11th, right? So what are we supposed to do today? Go. Yeah, I know you couldn't have planned that better, right? So, okay, so this is, of course, a celebration, or I should say, not a celebration, a ritual observance of those towards those of the dead who are not properly buried. So it's a very unsettling time. It's a time of the malevolent dead, known as lemurs, prowling around your house. So watch out tonight for lemurs. Ovid said that they appeared around midnight. The worshiper, who is the head of the house, was to make a sign with his thumb in the middle of his forehead, right, with washed hands from a clean spring water, and go like this. There you go. Okay, looks like we're flipping them off, right? All right, there he goes. Okay, you guys ready to do that tonight? All right, okay. And then he was to take black beans and throw them with an averted face. So take black beans, throw them with averted face, and say 9 times, Haec ego mitto his redemo misque fabis. Okay. Thee I cast, with thee I redeem me and mine. You see, the ghosts, these spirits, were thought to gather these beans. He then touched water after that. Next, the entire household got together, and they clashed bronze pots together and declared, "Ghosts of my fathers and ancestors be gone." So I guess tonight you got to go over to your kitchen, and if you have any bronze right there, and get the family, get the kids too, banging away as loud as possible, and tell them to go away. What do you guys think about that? Of all days we're celebrating, right? Okay, well, these sacred meals were called, for those who are living, right? Whether it be the Paternalia, whether it be for their birthdays, whether it be for these occasions, they're called a refrigeria. Refrigeria sounds like a refrigerator. Well, it does mean to the idea of refreshing. And so what will happen, of course, as we know, is archaeological evidence shows, and we know this also from various stories and inscriptions, is that people went to the tombs. And yes, we have, once again, those little pipes, libation pipes, and they poured libations into them in many cases, into the ground. Now, in the columbarium, the columbarium are upright. How are you going to do that? Well, it turns out that many of the columbarium, there's like little openings there, little spouts where you can pour a libation. In this case, it's water as well as wine. Wine's poured a lot. People like wine. You want that. So give them wine. And they deserve it, right? And he pours right upon the ashes, the refrigeria. Now, I got to tell you, is that they would have, in a sense, these celebrations there. They go out, and early Christians mimic this idea. What? So what happened is long story really short, this is the beginning of the cult of the saints. The cult of the saints has its origins in the ancestor cult of the refrigeria. Basically what happens, it started pretty early. In fact, we have even some exact dates, which I don't want to go into, but, well, okay, 258. I gave you a date. So it turns out, okay, how do I say this real quickly? I don't do it. Okay, so you have the idea where Peter is supposedly buried at St. Peter's, and Paul is supposedly buried at St. Paul's outside the walls. Well, what happened is during the Roman persecutions, they had to move the bodies temporarily to a place called San Sebastian. And I'll give you the year, 258. And we have discovered the site. And so Peter and Paul temporarily were placed there and then supposedly returned to, the Vatican on one side and St. Paul's outside the walls on the other side. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But we do have now inscriptions that show that Peter and Paul were being venerated here. Why is that important? Well, you see, what happens is Christians, in many cases, were rejected by their families. And so they no longer participated in the ancestral cult. They no longer did the refrigerium. They no longer were allowed. They were shunned in many cases. So what they did is they transferred that ritual, that refrigerium, to Peter and Paul at that site. And we find inscriptions everywhere in Greek and Latin calling it a refrigerium. So there's no doubt on that because we have the inscriptions. It's written down. People say, I don't believe that. Go there. I've been there. I've seen it with my own eyes. Yes. And so what they did is they transferred the Ancestor Veneration to Peter and Paul and then to the saints in general. To the saints in general. And so they became feast days of the saints. Ta-da! Yeah, that's where it got started from, the ancient ancestral refrigerium. And the idea is we don't have you as a family anymore, so our new family is the Christian family, and the saints are like a father, a mother, a sister, a brother to us. Isn't that fascinating? So, yeah, ancestral cults are pretty influential. We also, of course, we have the Celts, right? And we know this pretty well, obviously. Samhain is the border between this world and the other. This is that period of time of year, right? Many believed that the mystical doors of the were in a sense open between the dead, and the ancestors, of course, moved through them. But also you got some others that were not so wanted. Now, so while magic kept those who are undesirable away through various means throughout the year, the time of Samhain was a period when the spirits were offered a free pass to enter the world they left behind. And they were not required to use any magical passwords to enter or leave, since the worlds were virtually overlapping upon one another. Maybe better said, they're collapsing together. Everything seemingly descending into the primordial chaos once again. Of course, to the Celts, the mundane and supernatural were always closely connected, one often bleeding into the other year-round. And so Celtic legends are filled with stories of deities, heroes, spirits of the dead, and even shapeshifters visiting throughout the year, regardless of Samhain or not. But during Samhain, the veil was extra thin between worlds, and so the supernatural activity was particularly thick and manifest to all the senses. As the spirits of ancestors and demons emerged from their graves and dark realms, they were free to roam and destroy crops and sometimes harm people if they weren't careful or well protected. To ward away the evil, not only did they have the symbols of protection placed before their homes in various locations, but they often disguised themselves in rather scary masks and outfits. So the spirits would think they were likewise spirits and leave them alone. Eventually, villagers formed processions in costume in order to lead the troublesome spirits out of town. In Scotland, ghosts were impersonated by young men dressed completely in white, wearing masks and so forth. So we're familiar with Samhain. Yet, what I want to get to is not all the spirits were viewed as troublesome. For the spirits of dead friends and family were typically invited to come and invited to visit and were asked to be warmed by the Samhain bonfires. Here, the living would symbolically feast with the friendly dead. This occasion was sometimes called the Feast of the White-Haired One, the Snow Goddess, right? And sometimes it was simply the Feast of the Dead. In fact, on this day, the hearth fires in their homes were extinguished as the community bonfire was emphasized. And after this festival, a family member was chosen to carry a flame home from the bonfire to relight their hearth fire light. Also, for the ancestors, lights were placed in the windows to guide the dead home. These lights were left burning all night long, and food and drink were offered to the deceased. So you do have this beautiful occasion too. We often focus on the scary parts, and it really is a great moment of communion and of festivities with those who passed on. What about we go to Mexico? So as for the Day of the Dead, you see where we're going here? Los Días de los Muertos, right? It was originally a pre-Columbian celebration that was practiced by many of the indigenous peoples in Mesoamerica and South America, including the Aztecs. The Day of the Dead, by the way, was not originally on October 31st, November 1st, or November 2nd. No, it wasn't those 3 days. You're going to be upset by hearing this. It spanned from the end of July to mid-August. You see, the celebration was all month long. And so, but their months are shorter. So basically 20 days. So the Day of the Dead was not a Day of the Dead. It was a month of the dead and lasted for 20 days. The festival was dedicated to Micatecasihuatl, often known as the Lady of the Dead. According to one version of her story, Micatecasihuatl was once a human child that was sacrificed as an infant. Of course, infant sacrifice was common amongst the Mexica, the Aztecs. One of the most central days dedicated to Tlaloc, the fierce god of the rain, which involved the sacrifice of children of some kind. So basically what they would do is they dress up a kid and tell the child that something bad's going to happen. They're going to die, and the child would cry a lot. And they would think that was sympathetic magic. The more the kid cried, the more they will have rain coming up. But they did sacrifice the child later on. Anyway, so Micatecasihuatl is one of those sacrificed children. She was depicted as a skeleton with her jaw open wide so that she could swallow the stars during the daylight hours. This is the goddess who watched over the bones. Her intention was more than simply guarding the bones to ward away from their desecration. For many in Mesoamerica believed that the bones of humanity, of these ancestors in this world, eventually were made from the bones of people in a past world. So our bones are needed for when the next world was created. Also, you're going to have, she has a consort by the name of Mictlantecutli, who is the Lord of Death. who is also honored with various offerings. But you have to make sure that your entire right hand was covered with blood in order to do these sacrifices. Sometimes he is connected with the black Tizcapoca, equated by the Spaniards as the devil, right? You know, see him as the devil. Obviously, the Mexican didn't see him as the devil. And so basically you have this idea of Lady Death and the devil, when the Spaniards arrive, goes into popular consciousness. And we have lots of stories there. I can talk about Santa Muerte and a few others, protector of souls. But let's move on to the ancestor part. So what happens is that when the festival of Micticasihuaro became deeply ingrained in the spirit of the people, and it was transferred by the Spaniards to All Saints' Day or All Souls' Day, connected to November 1st and November 2nd, which also honored the deceased. Okay, so basically what happens is that on November 1st is called All Saints' Day for Catholics. It is also known as the Day of the Innocents, or the Day of the Little Angels for the indigenous peoples. Meanwhile, November 2nd is known as All Souls' Day for Catholics, but it is also known as the Day of the Dead for the indigenous peoples. So how in the world did you get a holiday that's transferred from July, August into October? Well, some people say it's because of the migrating monarch butterflies, which returned to Mexico in October. And so it is true that the Mexica and other indigenous peoples saw the butterfly. It's connected to the soul. And apparently the Spaniard says, hey, look, see, the butterflies are arriving. So that means the souls are arriving. So let's just go ahead and move this holiday over to October, November, sorry. So yeah, so there you have it. A good excuse maybe. In preparation for these days, beautiful altars are made at home. They're lavishly decorated with flowers, especially wild marigolds, right? And bright red coxcombs. The offerings are a cornucopia of food, including stacks of tortillas. Now I'm getting hungry. Fruits of all kinds, peanuts and other nuts. Day of the Dead breads also. Drinks are also placed generously on the altars, including hot cocoa and soda and water. The arriving spirits need to be fed, just like we see in all around the other places of the world, so that they are strong after making such a long journey from the other side of the veil. Typically, the kinds of foods and drinks will reflect favorites that were enjoyed by the deceased in life, which we saw again throughout the world. It's interesting because feeding your loved one who's an ancestor their favorite foods, you're going to find this everywhere from East Asia all the way through Europe, the Romans, Sub-Saharan Africa, and even into South America. It's just like, yeah, you're some universals in life. I thought that was rather interesting, but there we are. Gifts are provided too, and toys and candies for children, and cigarettes and shots of alcohol for the adults, right? So on the Day of the Innocents, some visit the graves of infants, and they bring toys along as well as other decorations. But in some cases, the families just wait to visit them and all the other relatives on the next day. The night before, children sometimes make, and this is pretty cool because some of my students talk about this in the reflection papers at the university, some of the children make what's called a children's altar to invite the spirits of the dead children to come back for a visit, although there are variations of this tradition. And so there you have it. And some even believe that some of my students will celebrate on October 31st. That's when the infants visit. So there's some variations. On the Day of the Dead, families typically visit the graves of their loved ones. They start by cleaning the graves, cutting the grass around it if it needs to be, and washing the stone. Next, the graves are decorated, cutting the grass around it. Graves are decorated, foods and drinks. There will be photos placed here too of the deceased. And then oftentimes there'll be an all-night vigil. And I like these all-night vigils. This is the day you can hang out all night, if hopefully they allow it, by the graveyard, right? And these all-night vigils, this is where family tells their stories about their deceased loved ones. So this is where you tell the stories. And what I like is that you tell not just the good, happy stories, you tell the funny stories. The idea is that the spirits of the dead are with you. They're beside you. What is it that you always wanted to say to them? And what kind of humor and banter do you want to do? And so these evenings are not just about, people are not just crying, they're laughing, they're celebrating, having this great feast. I don't know, this is a really good holiday. By the way, if you're curious, if in the Philippine Islands, they also celebrate a day that's much like the Day of the Dead too. Did you guys know that? Even though, again, the Spaniards do influence them too. According to the Filipino belief, when a person is dying, it is expected that they call on the names of their deceased loved ones. And after calling these relatives, usually their parents, they are believed to arrive right by their side, ready to usher them into the afterlife. So, in fact, many Filipinos claim, as they are dying, that they actually visibly see these loved ones around them, often standing at the foot of their bed, ready to take them home. Not only just family, mom and dad, but even other ancestors earlier on to welcome you to the other side. Much like in Mexico, Filipino Catholics and others celebrate October 31st through November 2nd, which is also called the Day of the Dead. Filipino families traditionally visit the graves of their deceased family members, cleaning and repairing the tombs, and singing songs and telling stories. It's the same one, right? How about India? Well, India, yeah. So India, they also have various celebrations to the dead that are going on there. And of course, who's in charge of the ancestors? It is Yama himself. He is the god of death, who is considered a divine ancestor, for it is thought that he was the first human to die. Yama is often accompanied by two hellhounds, each one with 4 eyes and very wide nostrils. And much like Cerberus, the triple-headed dogs guarding Hades in Greek and Roman mythology. These dogs faithfully guard the road of this abode. The offerings made to Yama during one's life are to pay the debt owed to this god for the price to actually live. I'll say it again. The offerings made to Yama during one's life are to pay the debt owed to this god for the price to actually live. So you have to pay a price. Isn't that fascinating, right? So what happens is that when we're born with a debt. And a debt is paid through ritual offerings throughout life. And then it goes into a metaphysical storehouse of sorts, being saved up until one's life is all paid for. And so if this debt is paid, one goes into the realm of heaven. So you got to make sure you pay your debts. Now, if one, unfortunately, it's a patriarchal system. If one has a son, this life debt is automatically repealed. For it is believed that the son who is in charge of rituals after the father dies will then continue these sacrifices to Yama, and so theoretically will pay up his father's debt. But you have that. There's other ideas too. There's also the triple debt. One has to pay in life for the gift of just living. So there are 3 debts, but we won't go into that. Of course, now I'm wanting to say it. First of all, you pay the debt through studentship to the gods through sacrifice, and of course through various offerings. So there you have it, the offer. Now, of course, when somebody dies in India, you have a 13-day mourning period known as the Shraddha. This is to remind the ancestors that they are not forgotten and are indeed loved. Such rituals are intended to give rest to the soul and also to ward away any negative possibilities. On the year anniversary of the person's death, Hindus observe the ritual of Tarpan. Their family makes special offerings to the deceased, usually of their most, yes, again, favorite foods enjoyed in life. I love going through these stories because after a while, you're seeing commonalities. Let's move on. We have to move on to China, shall we? Now, China is interesting. You have almost two souls after you die. You have what's called the Po, which went to the heavens, and you have the Hun, which stayed in the body of the deceased. And the Hun is what was needed offerings. But going way back when, back to the Shang dynasty. So what happens is that the Shang kings combine the role of political leader with that of religious functionary. They are viewed as official priests in connection with ancestor worship and the worship of the gods or higher powers. Of course, the question arises as to the nature of these higher powers. For while they were gods in a sense, understood collectively as the Dai, they are often regarded as literally deified ancestors, sometimes felt to be related to both the ancestors of the kings and the Shang royal clan in general, as well as to the aristocracy. In fact, there is a pecking order that is inherent in this concept. So you see this even amongst the ancestors, where the same privileges and status levels enjoyed in life were carried on in the afterlife. Worship of the Dai were frequent, followed by a very set liturgical calendar and consulted via what's called the oracle bones. They were consulted in regards of human affairs and situations. So they use these oracle bones to talk to the ancestors. Oracle, how do you do that? So basically, you take this bone, a femur, whatever it may be, and on one side is the affirmation, and that represents the affirmation. So you ask a question, and one side represents the affirmation, which means yes, and the other side of the bone represents the negation, which means no. So you ask your question of the ancestor, and then what you do is you take a hot poker and you put it right in the middle of the bone, and the bone will start to crack as soon as the poker hits that bone. And if it cracks towards the affirmation, that means whatever your question is, it's a yes. The ancestor says yes. Ancestor G gave you that toothache. That's a real one. You got your toothache because Ancestor G thought you deserved it. If the negation, the cracks go the other direction, that is a no, to your question. Isn't that cool? So they could solve it through these oracle bones. Then what they did is they turned it around. And what they did is they wrote the name of the person asking the question, or they carved it in, right? They also have the name of the person officiating it and the answer to the question. And from that, we can actually reconstruct much of the Shang dynasty earlier times. So what happens now is that we going further here is that both ancestors and gods were believed to dwell within the natural world. Here, this is where it gets interesting. If you are when you die in China, you got lots of different kinds of jobs you could do. What do you mean? I know. We think simply you just become an ancestor. Well, not in China. China, you have some flexibility. So, yeah, potentially you could end up an ancestor, but you can also end up, get this, as an elemental. That's right, such as connected to the earth or water. So, in fact, what will happen, it drives people crazy. Chinese ancestor veneration, in a sense, blends what we understand as animism with ancestor worship. And so it gets very confusing at times. So it's not a very strong dogma, right? It's very loosey-goosey. So what So that means when you die, you can become an ancestor, you can become an elemental, you can become a gi or a qui, right? Which are demons, you know. You can be connected to a spirit of a tree. You could even be elevated to a god. I mean, so like that's good news. So if you die in according to ancient Chinese religions, you got job flexibility. It depends on who you are, and you can go places. It's kind of fun. Okay, so, but then again, there's some darker aspects because what happens is that to talk to the ancestors, sometimes you had to be made an ancestor to talk to them. And so during the Shang dynasty to the Zhao period of time, it's like, we're not getting enough rain. So congratulations, today you get to become an ancestor. What do you mean? And they drown you in the river. And you go and you tell all the other ancestors and the spirits, hey, we need more rain. Oh boy, or if it rains too much, it's like, guess where you're going? It's like heading for that fire, congratulations, you're going to become an ancestor today. It's not exactly the most, wow, I get to become an ancestor. Exciting. Ancient Chinese religion was very shamanistic. Shamans were not only believed to speak with spirits and ancestors, but on many occasions were understood to be actually possessed by them and giving them special spiritual knowledge, able to answer many kinds of questions concerning fate and medicine and of course, obviously the Gi or the Qui, these demons behind misfortune. But sometimes the malevolent forces were not a demon at all, but an angry ancestral god. So, your ancestors mad at you. So you got to placate them. We enter into the Zhao dynasty. You have more recordings of Ancestor Veneration. We see this, for example, in the Book of Rites during this period of time. It describes what happens, and I'll be reading from it, when someone dies. It says, as soon as death took place, the corpse was transferred to the couch and covered with a large sheet. The clothes in which the deceased had died were removed. A servant plugged the mouth open with the spoon of a horn, and to keep the feet from contracting, an easy stool was employed. These observances were the same for a ruler, a great official, and an ordinary officer. At that point, you had a ceremony, a special ceremony. And there was those who are, vessels, you can call them vessels, known as the Shi, who allowed the ancestral spirit to enter the descendant impersonator, who would then eat and drink the special sacrificial offerings to them and give messages from a particular spirit that is called upon. So basically, you're going to have somebody who says, I'm going to be a vessel, and we're going to have an ancestral meal. And he opens himself up, and then that spirit enters into them, and they have a meal with that spirit who is embodying this individual. Now, accordingly, the Shi should be a child of the same sex as the dead ancestor. So it has to be a child, preferably a legitimate grandson if male, or a granddaughter if female. Okay, so there you have it. Early on, the Shi may have worn bronze masks to identify them as a relative rather than themselves. And so, once again, we have this special meal. Did you know Confucius himself supported the Ancestor Veneration? There's a big quote here. I won't go into it, but there you have it. Now, the Chinese have a special day dedicated exclusively to ancestors, known as the Qingming-ji, or the Pure Brightness Festival, celebrated on the 106th day after the winter solstice. So basically, April 4th, 5th. On this day, Chinese of all ages travel to the tombs of their ancestors and sweep them. They also present food and libations to their ancestors as well. Did you guys notice after a while, it seems like I'm telling the same story over and over again? I am. What's so interesting about ancestor veneration is that they're so similar. Now, according to current Chinese and Vietnamese traditions, immediately following the funeral of a family member, the newly deceased spirit had to gain as much strength as possible. So offerings occurred daily, if not twice, so that the family members can give that deceased enough nourishment to take on the challenges of their new mode of existence. So after a person dies, you set up a special altar. By the way, that altar is to be separate from, I'll stress this, separate from the other ancestor altar. So you have one dedicated to your ancestors in general, right? But you're supposed to, when somebody dies, create another altar that will only be up for a temporary time that's simply dedicated to them, and you do offerings there twice each day. Got it? Now, to feed the spirit or give them gifts, they needed to be burned before the special altar. And so these offerings include, of course, yes, their favorite foods, wine, and other deemed necessary items, even luxuries. Favorite foods, however, do not include meats or dairy products. All right. So the idea is you can take it with you. So what they will do is that they'll have what's called joss paper. And they will burn the joss paper that represents different ideas and different kinds of offerings that they're going to have in the underworld. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Some of these offerings are quite ambitious. And I'll tell you, a lot of my students will talk about, who are Vietnamese or Chinese, will talk about the kinds of offerings they make on joss paper to their loved ones. One told me about a Mercedes. His buddy, always wanted to have a good car. So he got an image of a Mercedes on joss paper. He burned that at his special altar, and he pictures now his buddy driving a Mercedes in the underworld. Another says, my buddy never had a girlfriend, so he burned an image of a girl, and apparently he's going to have a girlfriend in the underworld. I mean, there it has, But the most popular kind of offering are what are called hell notes. Now, Vietnamese and Chinese they're not thinking of it, hell as that's a Western concept. But what happened is when the missionaries arrived, they said, yeah, we burn this money on joss paper to give to those who just passed on. And the missionary said, oh, underworld, that must mean hell. There are hell notes. So hell notes are fake money made of joss paper, often consisting of bamboo, colored silver, or gold, that will be burned on the family altar, and so arrive in the realm of the underworld. Right? So what will happen is that you need money down there. You need money. What do you need the money? You need the money to bribe, maybe, various kings, perhaps the 10 kings of the underworld, to shorten your days in purgatory. So just like in Egyptian mythology, you have to go through various ordeals in the underworld. Although, as I said before, somebody's driving a Mercedes through. Maybe that's a smart idea. Make sure you give them a nice car so they can zoom on through. So to shorten their days. Okay, so the hell notes are issued in denominations of about 10,000 and higher, going into the billions. Sometimes they have the representation of a jade emperor on it. This, of course, is from the Bank of Hell or the underworld, because you need this cash. Sometimes you see food dogs. However, I got to tell you this. I have seen on these hell notes, not simply Yama or Buddha, but I've actually seen images of John Kennedy, Marilyn Monroe and Albert Einstein on these. So you get, get your own denominations there. I think it's kind of funny. Anyway, so what happens is this. There is a banking system in the underworld. Each person was born into this world by borrowing money from the bank of the other world. Each person stayed alive only so long as the term of repayment had not ended. At death, each person was required to pay back in full the loan contracted at birth. The 10 kings were, of course, the chief executive officers of this banking organization. So the hell notes then are intended to pay back the life debt. But of course, if there's no one there to send this money in, the spirit defaults on their loan and they will receive consequences. So you better, earn some money so there will be no problems down there. Wow. Okay. Interesting. So when passing before their altar, family members traditionally bow before it, believing they were, in effect, bowing before their recently deceased ancestor. This altar almost always included a photograph or portrait of the ancestor, a commemorative plaque, various cups for offerings. The altar is usually up for 49 days. A special altar's up for 49 days, after which time the spirit was believed to be in the underworld being judged there before. And so you have this great judgment there. So after the 49 days, you could take down the altar, and then everything's removed to now the main ancestral altar. Right? Remember, there's 2 altars. That's after that. I think it's, of course, very interesting. Now, also, one more thing. When the specific altar of the deceased is taken down, as I said, a lot of the stuff you move to the ordinary ancestor altar. But it is also believed that their ancestral spirit occupies a specific vessel in the form of a wooden tablet. And so the spirit enters into this wooden tablet as the resting place of the ancestral spirit. And so once the body is dead and decomposed, this wooden tablet becomes a substitute for it. These wooden tablets are stored inside the ancestral altar, right, as I mentioned before, or a shrine at home, or sometimes within an ancestral temple that's dedicated to the clan. It was expected that incense is lit before the tablet daily, and offerings of food and prostrations are presented at least twice a month. So yeah, it's a busy ancestral veneration in China. It's pretty elaborate. But what happens if you don't do that? What happens if you forget? Then you have what is known as the hungry ghosts. Okay, so what happens is this. Hungry ghosts are one of 2 basic types. First, they are believed to be ghosts of ancestors that were forgotten by their loved ones, especially by initially forgetting to pay them tribute immediately after they died, or if they were given a ritual that was conducted in an improper manner. If you messed up, then congratulations, that's going to be a hungry ghost. The second kind of hungry ghosts are those who committed some acts in life that deserve a kind of punishment that extends into the afterlife. And so what happens is that these ghosts are said to have needle-thin necks as a result of not being fed by their family, and that every time that food is placed on their mouth, they not only cannot swallow the food, they can't even taste it because it turns to ash. They also have protruding bellies, not because they're full, but because their bellies are full of air. So they decide to have a celebration dedicated to the hungry ghosts. On this day, families gathered together to pay tribute to these homeless souls. For if they fail to do so, they may intrude upon their lives and bring some kind of misfortune. Rituals are expected to be practiced that will aid the suffering of these wandering souls. So there you have it. In fact, sometimes they'll create little homes for them to be in and do these offerings, and hopefully they can get themselves out of purgatory. I just want to talk a little bit about Vietnam just quickly. I want to say that Vietnam has the same rituals, but what I find is interesting is the Vietnamese also, because in Chinese beliefs, it is supposed to be the male that always officiates. But in Vietnamese, it's both males as well as females can be part of or participants in the ancestral cult. So that's a little difference there. In Japan, let's go to Japan. Shintoism. Much like Chinese religions, these spirits occupy the natural world. It could be also the ancestors seeking to help or harm their descendants. There's also a little bit of flexibility there as well. Spirits are known as the kami, and it's quite flexible. And so you're going to have the same kind of flexibility that you saw in China. Now, but those are the kami that are directly related to ancestors. They're called the sorai. Yeah, but and these are those that are specific ancestors that are honored with memorial rituals dedicated to them at specific times after their death, which varies, of course, according to local traditions. And it can span anywhere from 33 to 50 years. Now, unlike Chinese ancestral veneration, Japanese ancestral veneration, when it comes to specific ancestors, actually has a time limit. You see, between 33 to 55 years after their deaths, it is believed that the ancestral spirit becomes less and less individualized. It becomes more and more a collective, blending gradually away into the kami. So there is a sense of absolute release and becoming one with the other spirits. So it's personalized at first, and you do these rituals and then become less and less as time goes on. Shintoism obviously will have the ancestor as well as the shrine dedicated to the various deities, the kami, located in the central room of each house in the form of a shelf or an altar. This is the same in India. It's the same in ancient Rome. It's the same in ancient Egypt. It's same everywhere. Everybody seems to have this ancestral shelf. It kind of sometimes looks like a miniature Shinto shrine, before which, of course, food is served every morning and evening. This household altar or shrine is called the kamidana, which literally means God shelf. Paper amulets or charms from the major shrines are placed around it. So you have that. Items are also placed upon this Shinto little shrine altar that's called a shinki. And so evergreen plants are there as well, and a tall vase called a sake tate. At the very center of the altar is a dish containing washed rice, known as okoma, with a wooden plinth called ozon, used for making the offerings. Positioned at the front left is a pointed lidded jar, the mitsutama, containing water filled about just a little over half full. Still on the right side, just behind this pointed lidded jar, is another lidded bottle called a haiji, containing omiki, which is basically purified sake. On the front right is a plate for salt, oshia, and just behind it is another lidded jar containing purified sake. Why am I saying this? So you basically give the ancestors a double-fisted sake. Once again, it's like, what? Sake? Wait, what? This is also another ritual that we see throughout the world, and that is giving alcohol to the spirits. And that's probably why alcohol is called spirits. Because you drink some alcohol, what's going to happen to you? You're gonna feel like you're possessed. You feel like you're out of control. And ancient humanity thought maybe you are out of control. Maybe you are possessed by something, right? So it's believed to have that same kind of power. So spirit feeding spirit. So remember that. In some other cultures, you can see that with rum, right? There is a festival called the Obon or Bon Festival in Japan. It's dedicated to honor the spirits of one's ancestors. It is during this festival that family visits and cleans their ancestral graves, as well as of course, revisit the household altars. Once again, same as China, same as everywhere else in the world, right? So there it is. You also have, by the way, people wear kimonos during this period of time. The last day of the celebrations, you have this beautiful day of the floating lanterns. Again, here paper lanterns are lit and then set down the nearest river. These lanterns represent the spirits of the ancestors as they symbolically return to the world of the dead after the celebration. And of course, fireworks soon follow. This is a beautiful, beautiful celebration. I want to tell you, I know we're running out of time. We actually ran out of time, but I got a few more. I just got to tell you, I had some cool ones. I'm sorry. These were so good. Northern Thailand. I have to tell you, the Northern Taiwan. In Northern Thailand, ancestral spirits were honored during a festival known as the Spirit Dance or the Ghost Dance, which includes offerings for ancestors through spirit mediums. So what happens is on the first day, it's called the Day of Preparation, where participants prepare the offerings and they construct what is known as the dance pavilion. They make a pavilion dedicated to the the dance, which of course includes spirit possession. And it's very specific how they put this together. 62 bamboo poles, each have an important meaning, with 6 posts in the center representing the 6 senses, 32 posts symbolize the 32 parts of the human body, and a final 24 posts representing the number of Sangha meetings in Buddhist history. So, each of these poles have a meaning. Now, anyway, at the end of the day of preparations, the ancestral spirits are then invited to the party, and they're invited to join them at the spirit house with a selection of offerings waiting for them to consume. So you have the spirit house, you're inviting them in, but more, because what happens is that these supernatural visitors also include spirits of the house as well as the various regions. So you do have other spirits invited, but mostly ancestors. On the second day, this is filled with unbridled celebration. There's plenty of drinking of alcohol. You are getting really drunk. And people are smoking cigars. And at this point, the spirit mediums, known as the Maki, dance nonstop. Families will also perform many specific rituals dedicated to the ancestors. Now, the word Maki means ride a horse. It is believed that the spirit of the ancestors climb on top of the dancer, much like a rider climbs upon a horse. The dancer then hears this loud slapping noise in the ears and suddenly becomes possessed. After that, they're dancing as possessed and speak whatever the ancestors wish them to say. After that, they are placed into ritual outfits that best connects with the spirit possessing them. After that, the mediums begin to dance in a slow manner, but will often then build in momentum. And then family members join in the dance, moving with the spirits of their ancestors. So you get to dance with your spirits, with your ancestors. You drink spirits and you dance with spirits. There you have it. I thought that was really interesting. I'm going to sneak a few more in here. Of course, you have Madagascar. Why not? Madagascar, they have a very elaborate ancestral cult. In fact, about half of the country's 20 million people follow their ancestral religion. And so there's a relationship between the family living and the relative ancestors. It's a very close one. These ancestors are called Razana. And in this case, they are believed, the ancestors are believed to constantly interact with the living and even intervene in their affairs. They don't go away. You don't have to call them. They're always there. They're always with you. This means that whatever relationship you had with a family member, it continues uninterrupted after they have died. And that just like anyone living, if you ignore them, they're going to be sad or even angry. So you're supposed to get this. You're supposed to act as if they didn't die, because they didn't die. They're always with you. And so you act as if they are with you. Always. To the end of your life. So if you talk to you're talking to your mom, for example, and she passes on, what you would say to your mom, normally, even after death, you still continue doing the same thing. You still have the same visits with your mom, even though she has died. You believe that she's there hearing every word that you say. So I guess as you get older, you may look like you're talking to lots of people who are those who have passed on. Interesting, right? The last thing one should do is, the last thing one should not do is forget your ancestors. Otherwise, they'll become angry with you. They can really mess up your life. The sacrifice of zebu is one of the expected ways to either honor or appease an ancestor, which is basically a humped cow. Every day, one is expected to throw the first capful of a newly opened bottle of rum into the northeast corner of the room to give the ancestors their due share. So you got to give their due share. So respect for ancestors is always there. There's one ritual that is called the famidama, meaning the turning of the bones. Basically what happens is that every now and then the remains of a family member is exhumed so that it can be rewrapped in fresh silk shrouds and then is returned to their tomb. The belief is that the ancestor only join the spirits of the they only fully die and fully go to the other side when they fully deteriorate, but they're still with you. They're still with you. Okay, let's go to Africa real quickly. Oh, I know we're running out of time and my mouth is getting tired of talking. Africa, let's talk about the Yoruba. The Yoruba, of course, what they believe in this belief system is they have, of course, the supreme god known as Olorun. And there's the sacred realm of the Orisha. But below these two levels is a third, and that is associated with the ancestors. Not everyone who dies can become revered as an ancestor. Family ancestors continue to live on because they lived a good moral life. So there's an ethical aspect to it. If you live a good moral life, and the longer you live, so a long life is a sign that you have been good. So the good don't die young. Amongst those in West Africa, the good die nice and old. And they've been so good that their power, their energy then continues into the next world, and then they become those ancestors. So it's important to be good, right? So typically, ancestor spirits in West Africa have three ranks. You have the spirit founders of clans, You have those who died before the genealogical records were kept, and the known dead. And of course, each clan has a mythical pair of founders. We can go into that. But what I find is interesting is, once again, just like we saw before in Thailand, is the idea of the sacred dance. So what happens here is that there's another celebration. I wanted to make sure I get to this. Family ancestors are often represented by an igungun, who are masked dancers. As they dance, the igungun become magical conduits of communication with the family ancestors. becoming possessed by them, and so are able to talk with those in the realm of the living. So once again, you're going to have the mystical dance. In this case, as opposed to in the Thai tradition where you're wearing the outfits, in this tradition, you're wearing also the mask of that ancestor or God. And as you dance, you're filled with adrenaline. The ancestor moves through you. You're going to see the same idea in the Americas, right? You can see the same idea is it's almost like how you dial the number, although we don't dial, we tap the number nowadays, right, with our cell phones, is how do we call in a specific ancestor or a God to possess us? What we do is we have to wear a mask or an outfit and then go into some kind of ecstatic expression. Sometimes it includes the drinking of alcohol. It sometimes includes dancing, and oftentimes it includes both as one. And so, in a sense, you're dialing the number or you're tapping the number saying, hey, see the mask I'm wearing? You know, see the outfit I'm wearing? I want you to enter me to talk to everyone. And you saw, of course, remnants of that even in other belief systems as well. This goes back to totemetic beliefs and perspectives all the way back. Well, we covered a lot. We covered a whole lot. And believe me, I could just keep on going, but I got to stop. But one thing I want you to leave understanding, and that is despite the diversity within Ancestor Veneration, they are much the same in intention. The commonality throws me off. It shows this that the human spirit, is so similar in many different ways, even if there are no connections between them. And that is that there's this belief that your ancestors go on, but because they are connected to you and to your family, they are more interested in what you do in your life. There's a personal interest there. And because they're on the other side, they have access to some kind of knowledge or power or understanding that can help you on this side. So what you got to do is you need to have a conversation, some kind of communication with them to help you, right? To assist you. But there is a contract. You know, if you do this for me, I want you, I'll do this for you. There's this contract. So the idea is that basically, all right, if I venerate you, if I remember you, if I do rituals for you, then you will do this for me. You're going to help me in this life. You're going to give me some insight. You're going to work some deals on the other side. And so there's this contract between them. You see that? There's something more, though. In many of these belief systems, obviously, there are those who don't quite fit as ancestors. But when they are not remembered in so many different cultures around the world, they're not very happy. And there's ramifications for forgotten spirits. And you see that all over the world too, the forgotten ones. And those who do terrible things in life, there are ramifications for them too. So I find it fascinating. I find it amazing. And I think it indicates so much that while we are so different as humans in many different ways, we still have those same basic needs for family, for connection, for I have to add one more thing. And that is much of this ancestral veneration, especially with those who just passed on, is about finding some sense of solace, some sense of comfort that they go on. that we love them, that we still want that connection, and that they're still with us. And you will see that same belief, whether it be Sub-Saharan Africa, East Asia, North America, South America, Mesoamerica, Europe, Australia. You'll see it everywhere. There's this deep connection with family, and that family knows best. And ultimately, they are there to comfort you, whether in life or in death. Thank you. I'm done. Okay. So I think I covered a few things, right?
Wow, yes, you covered so many different societies and different types of ancestor worship and ghosts and like hungry ghosts and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I see Dorian has a question. In the first tradition, you mentioned, did the circle of skulls appear to start from a direction related to the house facing or a compass facing? Did they go clockwise, counterclockwise, work their way in or place in sequence? Because they're circular, they're all the way around. They're all the way around. So it's hard to determine that answer. But yeah, they're all the way around. Yeah. You know, I want to do more too. There's so many different things I wanted to do. Oh my goodness. I wanted to go into also, the Seer religion of Senegal too. That was another one I really wanted to do. But you know, about the supreme deity known as Rug, which is the immensity. And they have those who are known as the Pongu. These are spirits who are intermediaries and so forth. But anyway, this time's too short. I'm sorry. I could do a whole talk on just Sub-Saharan Africa alone, and I'm right out of time. So, any other questions? No questions? Did I answer everything? How many in the circle? 108? I don't know. 108. No. They're not that big. Dorian says I wrote down a lot more than usual. Yeah, there's a lot going on. Yeah, once again. Yeah, so. And of course, the West African ancestral veneration, that's going to spread to when it goes across the Atlantic with slavery, and will enter into Brazil as well as other places. So you're going to see that going into voodoo, hoodoo, which I didn't have time to talk about either, ancestor veneration as well. This talk actually could have gone on for another hour. I'm just telling you ahead of time. So yeah, how are you guys doing? Okay. Do any of the practices involve keeping the body in the house to pay respects, making mention of cleaning the body, or releasing the fluids and solids? Yes, no, you do have rituals where you do keep the body in the house for a period of time. But usually it will last for 3 days. There's a reason for that. And it gets shorter in certain countries because of the climate and certain seasons. But you don't really want to have a body in the house for too long, if that makes any sense. But there is this tradition where it's 3 days. In fact, that tradition even goes into Semitic perspectives that you're not really dead until after the 4th day. So this even goes into the New Testament with stories of Lazarus, right? You have to wait, 3 days until he's really dead for Jesus to resurrect him. And you have this idea of Jesus on the cross for 3 days, on the cross and isn't buried for 3 days. Hopefully not on the cross for 3 days. It's a long time. He's in the grave for 3 days because then after that, he really is dead. Because there's this perception that even in Jewish belief, that the spirit just kind of hovers around for those 3 days and visits after you die. Isn't that interesting? So if somebody dies, that spirit is wandering around for 3 days before it moves on. 3 days is a long time. Yeah, and I'm thinking, In fact, the funny thing is, in the New Testament, it mentions Lazarus. The Bible says he stinketh. So he's rotting pretty quickly. So once again, this is Israel, or Palestine, because it was under the Romans at that time. But there are traditions where they had the body out, they put it on a couch, and they let it sit there for a little while. Yep. Dorian asks, do hungry ghosts make any particular sound? Their description almost sounds like a bagpipe. Well, the idea is they're not supposed to make any sound because they have needle-like necks, so they can't make anything. However, there are spirits that do make sounds. I didn't mention this in Mesopotamia. If you eventually, people are going to forget you. They will. And so in Mesopotamian belief, Samaria and Babylon, you become like a bat and you squeak like a bat. So squeaking that's kind of awful. For forgotten, you squeak like a bat. Eek, eek, eek. So there you have it. Yeah. Is there a link between the Egyptian soul with the name that has to be kept secret and the keeping secret of the name of the Hebrew God? Okay. It also sounds like the musical Cats. Sorry, that was a joke. You know, cat has 3 names. Okay, no. Is there a secret name? Well, that is a whole nother topic. I mean, that's a whole nother topic when it comes to the idea of the Yahweh and the power behind it. For the Egyptian, your name is your name. There's not a secret name. It is your name. And that name is immortalized. It's protected by the cartouche. So nothing will come of it. You don't want to have a name without a cartouche or some kind of protection around it. So if you go to Egypt, you look at the hieroglyphs, you'll realize names are protected for a reason. Because otherwise you take the name, you steal the soul. Got it? But they want you to know the name. They really want you to know your name. Their name, excuse me. Direct object, whatever. So what happens is this, because the more you say their name, the more empowered they are. Name is a good thing. Does that make sense? I mean, they're inscribing on their tombs, please say my name. I mean, how direct is that? Please say my name. Remember me. And again, the name is protected by a cartouche, so you can't use it for any kind of ritual. However, I shouldn't even tell you this. I didn't bring it. I have it in storage. I should have brought it out. I brought it out for other talks. I actually have an image where somebody, it's an Egyptian image, where somebody rubbed out the name. You saw it, right, Ali? Yeah. Oh, you want to see it too? Okay, yeah. And they rubbed out the name off of it so they can reuse it. So sometimes they'll also rub out the cartouche because they want to get to the name. There's always people who try to manipulate things. Yeah. So yeah, it sounds like Greek Hades also has a squeaking of the bats too, Ali. Yeah. That's where the squeaking comes from. Yeah, the squeaking bats get the wheel. Wait, what? Oil the wheel? I don't know. Okay, bad jokes. Dorian, if you were in Chinese underworld being judged and were sent a lawyer on a hell note, would you prefer Johnny Cochran, Lucifer, Morningstar, or Atticus Finch? I gotta tell you, this is not a joke. People have burned an image of a lawyer. Seriously. For to be in front of the judging kings. Yeah, they'll see, my friend in his life, he needs a lawyer, and they will do that. For an image of a lawyer, and he will be there. I have the most entertaining reflection papers for my students, because who include Vietnamese and Chinese students. So who may be watching this right now, right? And you're going, oh yeah, I know one. My friend, my buddy, the most entertaining. I mean, ones I hear from them, so which I gave. Hopefully it's okay. Well, this is years ago, some of these, so we're okay. But yeah. So yeah, a lawyer, you can, whatever you want to give your loved one in the afterlife, especially for their journey. I think the car was a great idea. But I'm thinking if it's a real rough journey, would you want to have a car? Shouldn't you have something like a 4x maybe? Something that's really durable to get through to the other side. I laugh about this, and I'll have to be honest. I have people who do this, and they laugh about it too. I think we in Western culture get a little bit too serious at times. We do. We get too upset, like sacrilegious. We should have said that. Meanwhile, they're busting the gut, telling me this. And they're like what? You know, he would love this. You know, so sometimes we need to relax. Seriously, and of course dancing. I mean, that's great. Okay, we have more here. Jack Adams says, thank you so much for the insight. Purely enlightening to see all these many different cultures with overlapping beliefs and practices. Thank you, Jack. Yeah, it is. In fact, I feel like a broken record at times. I feel like it's like, here's the same story, and yet it's thousands of miles away. Like, how is this possible? You know, the funniest one, and I love this, is that you feed your loved one who's passed away their favorite food. I mean, they all seem to do it. It's like, you know, and you know they're not connected, so they're just thinking, what am I going to do, you know, to make somebody happy? Well, they have a favorite food, they have a favorite dinner recipe, and I'm going to give them that. I think that really kind of softens my heart a little bit, thinking, hey, you know, people really love these people, and people love people with food, right? You know, manja, you know, the mom, I'll feed you. I can picture some of these tubes filled with all this food, you know, piles of it. And to be honest, they are filled with this food. So there you have it. Logically, if the circle protects the name and you scratch off the circle, you have access to the name. Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's, sometimes they do that. Like, duh, they don't think about that, right? You may want to chisel in that circle, that cartouche a little deeper, right? Make sure it's really, really deep. Didn't Isis trick Ra to get his name? Yes, that's one of the stories. Yeah, there was this trick, and she got that power, right? Take a chariot drawn by lions, please. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. So somebody wants to have a chariot drawn by lions in the underworld. That would work. I would go for that. Julian says, interesting that the concept of a circle continued into and throughout later magic. Yeah, as portals, as openings too. So to the other side. Now, once again, Adorian says, in ancient Chinese religion, how was the ancestor to be selected? Everything is based upon who you are, your merit, what kind of person that you happen to be in life is where you go in the afterlife. So, if you know, it's pretty open-ended. And by the way, there's a quote, I didn't quote it, I didn't read it, but there's a quote that I had there from a scholar saying, you know, it's very frustrating for scholars to study this because it doesn't fit within a Western paradigm. And there seems to be inconsistencies that we understand from a dogmatic perspective. And he went on, but you get the point, is that seemingly contradictions from a Western standpoint make perfectly sense to even the selection of what you're going to become in Chinese religions. I had one of my students said that his grandma became the tree outside his house. It's like, okay, you know, and you don't sit there and go, well, why is that? You know, why do you think it's a tree? And why do you do a veneration of that tree? He just felt it. There's a tradition in his family. There's others who believe it. Done. Right? But we are so focused on, let's make it into a dogma. Let's quantify it, qualify it. It doesn't always work, unfortunately. I wish it did, but it didn't, you know. Okay, so I'm referring to the ones sent to ask the ancestors for rain or to reduce rain. Oh, yeah, those, right? Yeah, you know, you mean congratulations, you're becoming an ancestor today? Probably because if you're on the wrong side of the road, I don't know. maybe, you know, you also have in society those known as scapegoats. So you have that culture too. So maybe you're not as popular as you should be. But the selection, although there are examples of those who are considered really good people that want to go and be a special vessel. So it's like, yay. I'm not sure if I want to do the burning or the drowning, but you know, every time they dredge, unfortunately, they dredge the various Yangtze River and Yellow River, they come across all these bodies. You know, so this really did happen. People really were, and we don't hear about that, but archaeologists hear about this all the time. It's like, yeah, there are a whole bunch of bodies because that's over a period of time they do this. Yeah. For Samhain, with so many friendly dead being invited to join in on the meal, did the cook's skill dictate how many became grateful dead, or does that require guitars and good brownies? What kind of brownies are you talking about? The spirit brownies or the food brownies? Sorry. Okay. Sorry, I couldn't resist that one. I'm sorry. The cooks, I don't know. What if the dead hate your food? What if you're a terrible cook? I don't know. It's a real good question. I don't have an actual direct answer to that. What do you think? Girl Scout brownies because they have cookies? Says Allie. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't. All I know is that Samhain, and many do practice this, but sometimes not enough. There needs to be more of an emphasis on having a meal with your loved ones. There really does need to be that. And again, do you notice that almost every single one of these belief systems have food as the center too, right? A meal, Again, you got to love that, feeding the dead, true, but also having the dead with you for a meal, a sacred meal. Of course, that idea goes into Christianity. Hello? Eucharist, communion, anyone? Aha moments, mind blown, right? Last I checked, that was supposed to be a special meal, the agape feast, right? Is this interesting? So, yeah, meals with dead, that's what you do. I suppose also the sin eater. Yeah, maybe, the sin eater takes up it had the wafer, puts it on the body, and, there's a Eucharist there, and, that was a great movie, by the way. What's it called? I forget the name. I have it. I love it. I have the soundtrack. Anyway, what is Kennedy Hell Note supposed to do for someone in the what is Kennedy? Oh, what is the Kennedy Hell Note supposed to do for someone in the underworld? Okay, so the Hell Notes. I know you're interested in these Hell Notes. If you're interested in getting the Hell Note, oh, can I tell you a sad story too? Are you guys ready? All right. I do have a terrible Hell Note story. Okay. So if you want to get a Hell Note, you go to Little Saigon and you can get it there. There's a little mini mall there. And you can, if you're in California, you can visit that. So many Vietnamese neighborhoods, you can get these Hell Notes. And when it comes to various images, it's just to sell Hell Notes. It doesn't have any special purpose. Although Kennedy, the idea is you're supposed to choose very positive people or images on these Hell Notes, either that or something that's sacred. And so Kennedy is looked up to in many different ways, and that's why there's no real rationale. But I'll tell you one story. It's a story I can tell. I had one. This is like a decade or more ago, and one of my I was actually doing a talk near Little Saigon. Yeah, it was interesting, right? Talking about ancient Chinese and Vietnamese religions. It's like I told you, I could go on on this one. And I'm there, and I'm talking about the Hell Note. And one of my students, who's there, I don't know who's attending, her face turned white as a sheet. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? So she comes up to me afterwards, and she says, well, I'm Catholic. I'm Vietnamese, but I'm Catholic. And my mom and my grandma, they practice the traditional ways. And it was time for my grandma's birthday. And I was very excited. And I went to a store in Little Saigon, and I got this beautiful card, and I wrote on it, and I said, dear Grandma, I love you so much. And she gave it to her. It was this beautiful on Joss paper. It was a Hell Note. And the grandma interpreted it as, you want me to die, and die within the week. Yep. And she was, in a sense, she was disowned by the family. she was not allowed to go to the funeral because she did this misstep. So this can be serious, so this is a problem. So, and she felt awful about it. And she felt like something was always wrong in her life. She did pass soon after. She was, somebody went to my other talks too. Is this interesting? So so there is something. Now, is this self-fulfilling prophecy? It may have been, grandma saw this and believed it, affirmed it, and it happened. But in other cases, we got to be very careful too. Yes, I mentioned you can laugh, you can, enjoy things, but you also have to be careful when it comes to ritual. You have to do things, she probably should have had the foresight to know her culture enough to know that she's writing on a hell note. Yeah. Does that make sense? You guys got it? So sorry, that's a little dark way of talking. I'm not going to end the talk that way. We got to talk about something up, but yeah. So there are negative things, but there are other positive things too. In the right context, though. However, the hell notes can be something that's positive. It gives you hope that there's something good that can happen that you can do in the afterworld, and you feel like you're part of that process. During that 49 days, you're part of the process of helping them to the other side, to pay off their debts in life, to give them gifts, to say wonderful things to them, to give them an altar, and it really is a beautiful way of closure. And by the way, this practice, if you're Vietnamese, you know this is part of your practices all the time. A large portion of Vietnamese practice this ancestor veneration. Yes, even through communism, this is a very strong mainstay. Yes, is that good? Right? Yeah. So any other questions? Did I cover it all? Did you guys enjoy it? Right? Did you guys? Right? Yeah. All right. So I guess we're doing another talk. I'm doing the sublime oracles next time. That should be coming up. And then I'm doing the Chaldean oracles. Oh, that's going to be really good. So you'll enjoy both of them. Apparently, I'm doing oracles. So anyway, hey, I talked about the bone oracles today, didn't I? Right? So here we go. So lots of oracles here. Julian says sublime, right? This is Ali. Julian says, ironic though that eating food is the one thing that can't be done in heaven or by spirits in Judeo-Christian and presumably Islamic traditions, though parables can be told where this happens to give moral or ethical lessons. Yes and no. It depends on that form of Christianity. You do have this idea in the book of Revelation where there is this meal, and that food can be eaten from this tree in the middle of the New Jerusalem, of the various fruits. And so the idea is, I guess theoretically, you can take a bite of it, and you also have the marriage feast of the Lamb, which supposedly they consume. But maybe it's a spiritual, maybe it's metaphor, maybe it's allegory, or maybe it's just somebody else's belief system. So anyway, but you do have that. But yeah, I understand that. But Laurel says my questions were all answered, or answered. Sorry, not all answered. I don't think I answered all your questions here. We're done with life. Dr. Rietveld answered all the questions. It's like, well, good. I feel good. Now I can move on. Wait, no. Yeah, that's the other part I always worry about. A lot of the belief systems, whether it be Hinduism or going into Chinese religions, this idea of debt. And once the debt is paid, you leave this life. It makes me want to stay in debt. Don't pay it off. Of course, then if you die ahead of time, you have to make sure your loved ones pay off your debt. So anyway, Julian says, in essence, you can't get more physical than food. No, you can't. Oh, Ali says, and in Judaism, we put out a cup for Elijah every Shabbat. Yeah, in fact, yeah, and the chair, right? You have the chair ready for Elijah for Passover. You had that open, right? Because he's going to come back. He's going to arrive. He's going to sit there anytime. Of all those tables, if you get chosen for him to sit in your dining area, that's quite an honor there, right? Yeah. Then maybe eventually you can finally have your Passover lamb, which you can't have. Okay, it depends. A lot don't have the Passover lamb, obviously. Because that was stopped after the destruction of Jerusalem. So yeah. But Elijah shows up. Maybe you can call in the lamb. Sorry. What's your depends? Are you Orthodox or Reformed, or I don't know which side you lay upon, or conservative? So, okay. I heard that. I thought Elijah's supper was only the Passover. That's what I'm talking about. Passover. Yeah. Just I guess we have a conversation going about Elijah's supper. Okay. So who's coming for dinner? Right? The Jewish version. Elijah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So for Passover, but some put it out for every Shabbat because he will come on Sabbath. Yeah. How many cultures have mourning periods that are 6 weeks? That number keeps repeating and is related to how long it takes to recover from giving birth. I don't actually know the number. I guess I'm not answering all your questions anymore. The question answering machine is dead. I don't know how many cultures. I know there's a few there, but I don't know how many personally. So, right off the top of my head. So, off of my head, to be maybe put on a little red podium, in the middle of a Natufian hut. Would that be good? And I can grin at you. Always think about that. The Natufians, they come home and they see the grinning image of the person who just died. Hey, I'm home. Oh, hey, Grandpa. Although people live such short lives in those days, to be like 25 is like an old age, or 30. Most likely, it's not Grandpa; it's Mom or Dad. Unfortunately, so that's the reality. Ali says, "Are carried by Kali." I'd settle for that. Okay. Oh, carried away by Kali Ma. You're talking about? Yeah. Okay. Well, that works. Yeah. And she's quite a dancer too. I hear, right? She does this dance around Shiva, but we're stopping. We're not talking about that anymore. That's a whole other dance around conversation. So that's my Kali talk, right? She does come with a skull. She actually comes with a series of skulls, right? Wrapped around. Yeah, and lots of blood too. All right. Are we okay? We're good? We're good? A whole circle. Yeah, it's whole circle, right? We're back to circles then, right? You're giving me the runaround. Yep. Circumlocucious, right? All right. In a roundabout way. Okay. All right. So we'll circle back to that one eventually. So, all right. All right. So, okay. Laura says it might have been comforting to see the ancestral skulls, like looking at photos. I guess keep going. Okay. I know that we see it as morbid, but I think from their perspective, they may see what we do as morbid. What we do with our loved ones, we cast them out, we bury them far away. Doesn't seem right from their perspective. For their perspective, it's like, well, no, they should be at home. We love them. They should be part of the soil that we're upon. That way they're always with us. Their sacred energy, their bones are amongst us, giving us energy, giving us the sense of legacy, of connection. So, Natufia may look at us like, well, are we crazy? What are we doing? We're throwing people away. So I don't know. It's all about perspective, So, now, of course, obviously, we wouldn't do that today because that would be called a crime scene. Now, I do have to tell you that if you are digging around your backyard or in your house and you come across a bone, I'm going to give you some advice, although we do have a doctor here who may know better, but some archaeology advice. And that is, if you get a bone, if you have a skull, let's just say that you've disturbed it. If you didn't disturb it, don't touch it. Well, let's just say that you're digging around and the skull goes flying. So you got to pick it up now. What you want to do is you take the skull, this is forensics, and you sniff its nose. Why would you sniff its nose? Because the last part of the body to decay is in the nasal cavity right up here. You guys know that? So what happens if it smells putrid? That's a new death, and you call the cops. If it doesn't smell at all, maybe it's an ancestor long gone or somebody has passed on. I don't know, but there is a nasal cavity right there. So and that's the fun that we learned. And I was there with a group of people, and that was actually taught to me from the Los Angeles coroner that in LA. So do the forensics team there. So I guess it's called sniffing the skull. So I don't know. I don't think too many people sit around sniffing skulls, though. They probably think you're crazy. It's like, what are you doing? Also, it's kind of macabre to put a skull that close to your face. But anyway, that ever happens to you, there you have it. Yes, human bones aren't illegal to possess in California as long as you can prove where they came from. I'm sure some company exists to clean up the body for home display. Yes. I have been approached before by a student saying that he was digging in his backyard. He was from East LA, saying he came across a skeleton if I wanted to come over and to take a look at it. And I told them, no, call the police. So, but I don't know. What happens after that? The police will determine if it's old or not, and then they'll call the coroner, and in many cases they'll call the archaeologist if it is. Does that make sense? And I know somebody, my daughter's boyfriend's sister works in that area of forensics, and so then she's called to the scene and takes a look when it comes to archaeology. Is that fun? Too much information? Yeah. Okay. All right. Wow. Can't believe you have me talking along. It's like 10:32. We're still talking. So are we okay? Do we cover everything you wanted to know? Everything you wanted to know and more? Dorian says, just more ancestor veneration. The ritual of calling the LAPD to call the coroner. Yes, it's right. It's another ritual. Yeah, it's like if you come across any skeletons at home, skeletons in the closet, call the police. Actually, or just call your best friend and then call the police. Decide whether or not you want to call or not. So that's another question altogether. It's like, hey, who is this? Maybe, and will we be implicated? So I don't know. I'm sorry. Just thinking rationally, I think the first thing I would do is call somebody I know and then call the police. I don't think I think that's a smart thing to do. Always go with the buddy system. Always have a best friend that you can bury bodies with. So okay. I think we've gone too far. Anyway. And I've had nothing to drink, by the way. So, but I probably should now. After this talk, maybe we should drink and start doing some dancing. Traditional ancestor veneration rituals. What do you guys think? Right? No spirits were involved in tonight's lecture. I don't know. They may have been involved because guess what? Remember, you guys, you forgot. Happy Lemuria. That's right. We are actually celebrating on that day. Actually the most important day of all. So go out and get your we'll throw a little rum in the corner. I'm wanting you to go like this, and throw beans out the door and banging some bronze pans. Come on, you guys, get in with this. You got to keep those evil lemurs and those unwanted spirits away from your home. So be careful. It'll be all right. You'll survive. Do you guys have any bronze pans there? Okay. Yes. Any other questions? Nope. We're all good. Going once. Going twice. We're sold. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Better
Thank you
now.
for being here and looking forward to the next talk.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Night.
Right.
Night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Jillian. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Laurel. Thank you, Dorian. Thank you, Margie. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Sarah. Wherever she went. All right. Well, that was fun, wasn't it?
That was fun. We got kind of silly there towards the end. Or not
yeah.
us. Y'all got silly.
Oh, I got silly? Me? I never get silly. I'm always dead serious the whole time. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I think it's important to be realistic about it. I think that is that yes, there's a sense of solemnity, but there's also a sense of fun too.
Mhm.
And I think we forget that. I think we get too uptight at times. And again, because I teach a world religions course, they have to write 5 reflection papers every semester, and you do that, and you think to yourself, I have 30 to 40 students, and I've been teaching these classes for a couple of decades. You get a lot of insight from students from all over the world, and they tell their stories, and so I'm filled with these stories. So it's like how do you know? It's like because I've read them for my students over and over again. Students from sub-Saharan Africa, students from Vietnam, students from China, Japan, and they have to do a final paper, and I get it on that too, research paper. So yeah, it kind of permeates after a while. And ancestor veneration is just very common all the way across the board. I've realized,
It's incredible how similar it is in such diverse cultures. It being something that I've looked into myself, I've just been astonished at oh yeah, same stuff.
Same thing. So even with Judaism too, there's so many similarities. It's just amazing, and so yeah, one follows into the other and then to the other. So again, we're back to I always look at the tripartite conception, and tripartite conception is as follows: is that people, traditions, and ideas either came through oral tradition, through the migration, or number 2 is through common phenomenology. It's just that we because we're human, we understand things in a similar way, and so things are come about not necessarily connected to one another, and so that's what we have with ancestor veneration. Is these ideas they didn't steal these ideas from the other. Many of these, sure, there's connections between Hinduism and Buddhism in here, but when it comes to places in South America and sub-Saharan Africa with East Asia, no, there's no connections. It's too far. So that's the second one. The third one is a mystical spiritual connection. We're all one, which academics don't talk about. So we go for the first 2. Is that making sense? So it seems like it's about common phenomenology, and so we learn more about our intrinsic humanity as a result.
There is also the option with the first one, if you push back the birth of civilization, human culture a little bit, then the idea of a shared culture across different places makes, I don't know, I was so tripped out when I was reading, is it in Plato's Republic, where he goes off about Atlantis? Have you read the original on that?
Oh yeah.
And it is such a trip when he's like, the Mediterranean Sea, this is a bay compared to this ocean that's out on the other side. And on the other side of that, there's another continent. And let me tell you the history about when interactions happened between.
There's the idea. You were there for that lecture? There's the idea of earliest civilizations. I think you were there for that one. Were you? I did that recently, and I talked about that the possibility of before the last ice age, the possibility of earlier civilizations that existed that were destroyed. We know that one survived, actually 2 survived. We got the Jomon culture of Japan. It's before the Ice Age. I mean, before the end of the Ice Age. Extends back to 14,000 BCE.
Yeah, the Yonaguni ruins are a trip. Those are some cool
possibility there, right? And
that's attached to the Jamoan culture of Japan, I believe.
Yep,
that's
off the coast. Yeah. And the Japanese themselves believe that is that it was made from that culture. even though the American, the Canadians say no, the Japanese archaeologists and geologists and scientists say yes. They say,
Well, they've got ancient myths that say that,
Yeah,
and
I
in
know.
India there's ancient myths saying that, and in Greece there's ancient myths saying that.
Of the
It's
coast
like,
well, and then the Tufians too. The Tufians are also, who I just talked about. Their culture goes back to 14,000 BCE. They're also from the earlier era, where the water levels were lower, and so there's more coastal regions to have civilization because people like to live along the coasts, and that area was covered up. I mean, who doesn't want to live along the beach? And that's where people want to be. So there's definitely, I mean, we do know there's possibility of civilizations. In fact, there is civilizations that we can document. So yeah, it's fascinating. And of course, the whole idea, Göbekli Tepe, that discovery. It's like, well, that was 10,000 to 9,000, 8,000 BCE. That threw everybody off. It's like, wow, that's way older than Stonehenge. So yeah, there's lots of more mysteries to be discovered. It just will take some time. So there could be evidence of a more unified culture.
and Göbekli Tepe brings us back to the Younger Dryas period, where there was a mini ice age and the water levels receded. So we know that there was culture at a time when the water levels were that low.
Yep, and of course you have those mini what do you call it, those extraterrestrial little bits in our soil, even California, that something crashed to cause the Younger Dryas. That's been identified by the university, UC Santa Barbara, recognized that. And
Are they nano diamonds? Is that what it
nano
is?
Diamonds. Yep, nano diamonds they found in the soil from this object that crashed into us. And
there's the huge crater in Greenland that we discovered very recently that it seems very likely that those nanodiamonds are connected to at that period.
And then, of course, there's an earlier one, of course, obviously the Yucatan, right, with connected to the dinosaurs and so forth. So yeah, we have things dropping on us all the time. So, but there's possibilities. That's way too earlier. Otherwise, we'll go into Doctor Who and the dinosaur people. So that's all. The saurians, what are they called? I don't know. So anyway. All right.
Get into Lovecraft territory there.
Yes, Lovecraft. Yes, which I do teach too. So yeah.
I watched that lecture as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Lovecraft. Oh yeah, that was fun. Yeah,
That was a good one.
All right, good stuff. Well, great having you all here. And
I would be down to share something a bit more personal in relation to this topic.
Okay.
That I didn't want to talk about on recordings, but so my cat Chronic, I had a cat named Chronic, and he got hit by a car, unfortunately, and passed away. And I skinned him, and I have his pelt. I've got a little altar for it, and I have cat food and water with his pelt there. And so it's interesting, like the idea of keeping like skulls in your homes and stuff like that. To me, it's a way of, it's not morbid. It's like a way of connecting with him and with the whole cycle and keeping his memory. And like, yeah, I don't know. It becomes a very touchy thing though to get into in today's society because.
Well, yeah, no, I have a friend in the Netherlands whose beloved dog passed away, and she had it stuffed, and it's in her home. And it's still sitting, laying on the doggy's favorite couch, just resting, and just sitting there. And she finds comfort, that this is the place where the doggy is. And I could see that. I mean, I think society needs to relax a little bit. That people have different ways of paying tribute to people and beloved kindred spirit animals the way that we love them. We want to do this, and I think that's great. Even if you, or reptile, right? Beloved reptile. I mean, I think there's a place for it. So, but again, I think people grieve in different ways. People do dedications in different ways. I do like the idea of having a big tent party, though. With lots of drinking and dancing. I don't know. That sounds kind of cool.
Oh, that's what we'll do for you someday.
Yeah, just they'll be like, he doesn't look like he's Northern Thai. Well, we're having yeah. Well, okay, but that's what I want. So my friend Arissa's half Thai, so I can see if she help do that, but whatever. There's that Thai. Julius is not sure if you saw the question just above. Which one? What are the similarities between ancestor worship and Judaism? Okay, well, there's a lot of when it comes to obviously the importance of kinship, of family. That's there. There's dedication there. Although there's other stories. Should even go to these stories where the rabbi stories where you're at the grave and you know what I'm talking about, right? And they're uncomfortable, because they've not been very good in the underworld. I mean, Sheol, and so they have to readjust them.
So currently we're in the counting of the Omer, and we just celebrated Lag BaOmer. And during Lag BaOmer, the gravesite of the Ari is in Sfat in Israel, and such huge crowds at that gravesite to people trying to daven who are there to pray at the gravesite of the great Sadiq, the great sage there. And it's so many people that it's said that on Lag BaOmer, even the Ari isn't at the Ari's grave. He goes somewhere else to pray because it's too crowded there.
Yeah. There is that reverence for family and for kin and for various figures. So yeah, so in many ways that what I talked about is that they use the word Yahwehism. Not sure if I like that term. I have about two reasons why, but I'll tell you that's later. Yahwehism sought to supplant the ancestor veneration and take its place, and that was officially the idea. But I think ancestor veneration in many ways still continues in another form within Judaism. I guess that's the best way to put it. But I'm not answering the question, but I am. So, that makes sense. What do you think, Ali?
Oh, so I did have a thought in regards to your comment earlier about the translation of the necromancer thing.
Yes.
That
Yes.
that maybe like what came to my mind is, asking them to do things is not okay. Right. But just like giving offerings to your ancestors is not asking them to do anything for you. And that's something that I believe was continued in Jewish tradition in many ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. Necromancy is the act of forcing that ancestor to come back to do things for you. Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah. Then you also get into the difference between like theurgy and other types of magic where like you could even define a difference between like maybe asking them to do something is okay, but performing a ritual where you're binding them and commanding them to do something, like that's not something we do.
That's not cool.
But so one interesting thing, so the king of Israel, a famous king, Saul, predecessor of David and Solomon, famously went to the story of the witch of Endor is how it's translated. But it's the same Hebrew word that's used for what the forbidden thing, and the king of Israel, and a famous story goes to her, and there's within that offerings that are made to ancestors, and that would definitely be an interesting part of the Bible to reference in regards to that.
That would have been a good, actually, have done the seer of Endor, calling out, Saul needing help, and from Samuel, and
weren't there oblations made to the ancestors, and Saul brought her food, I believe,
offerings and everything else, and of course, obviously, but here's the interesting part: is Samuel does appear. So I guess it worked, and I mean it did work, I guess, right? So, but it wasn't pleasant for Saul. What will happen to him as a result? So hey, I'm not sure if that was a good idea to make it work. Maybe it should have been like it didn't work, but it he does show up, and they're pretty hard on Saul. It's like, yeah, don't count the number of your troops. It's like, what are we supposed to do before a battle? Now you're in trouble. Saul gets a bad rap. I'm sorry, but poor King Saul. Of course, then he goes crazy, and then he's a problem. But that's a whole other story. I had a friend who loved King Saul. He's just misunderstood, man. He was Jewish too. He's just misunderstood. He's the first king. The bar was kind of high for him. Sorry, I'm stopping now. Oh, Julianne, some people say that the witch or medium was a surprise to Saul to see Samuel's spirit. In other words, they interpreted that she was a fake medium. Yeah, like she didn't really do it, but that he just showed up on his volition. But it's still not a good coincidence. I'd probably show up like afterwards, another time, the day after. Showing up then, probably not good. But yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, he's supposed to be a false medium. As opposed to, real mediums are medium rare, actually. So that was a alliteration. These jokes, I gotta stop. I'm getting hungry. Okay, at least Julian liked my joke, okay? Okay.
I've got some kitty food out that I can share if you'd like.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah. Kitty food. Kind of looks good. Yeah. Yeah, necromancy is banned in Judaism. That's what we're talking about. Yeah, it is banned. That Saul was not supposed to be doing that, which could be the interpretation of Ab or Ab. But he did it. And then, of course, he started going crazy. David was trying to kind of calm him down a little bit, but his play didn't seem to work, I guess.
Does it say specifically that he went crazy as punishment for visiting her, or can you interpret, is that a later interpretation?
It's a later interpretation. I think he just
that you can interpret differently.
I think there's too many things that are going at him at once. And he started, again, I'm not sure if he, this is a whole, I'm not sure if he, I'm sort of with my friend, I'm reading through this going, what would I do in Saul's place? I don't know. Towards the end, though, he does become pretty crazy towards David. I mean, he throws things at him and, tries to kill him. I mean, that's kind of crazy, right? Although David's not exactly the nicest guy either, but that's a whole other story. So, and the whole Bathsheba thing kind of drives me crazy. It's like, hey, your husband, Uriah the Hittite, guess where you're going? In the front lines, because that kills him so he can marry. That's bad, dude. I'm sorry. There's just
getting into a lot of this, getting into the stories around Solomon's building the temple is very interesting.
Yeah.
The Testament of Solomon.
Yes. Oh, the Testament of Solomon. Yeah, and the wisdom too. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Oh,
well, the Testament of Solomon. Yeah, that's the one where it lists like all of the demons that he invoked and brought before him, and then he's got the ring that he like throws at them, and then he binds them and commands them to do different tasks in regards to building the temple. And there's like rocks that are too big to lift, but it's okay because we got demons who are strong enough to do that.
The demons will do it. So they're hardy workers. Yeah, I know. I know that's not exactly. I have some ethical issues with that one. I don't know. That's just me. I don't know. Using demons to build buildings. I don't know.
And I mean, he could have just asked them rather than
ask them nicely,
the whole,
right?
like making them his servants and essentially.
Yeah, Domenios and the others, right? Ask them, hey, why don't you come on over?
Asmodeus was one of the main ones
too. Yep. And of course, Lix Terex and a few others too. Yeah, so that's fun. Yeah, that's a whole other topic too. Boy, there's so many topics we can go to.
Too much good stuff.
Huh?
Too much good stuff.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Absolutely. Yes. So we've done it, right? We've done it. We've got through. Julian says there's what?
I had a quick question. Have you heard about the discovery they made in Canada of evidence of a civilization 7 times older than the pyramids?
No, I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, I read about it on Reddit, and so I didn't know if it was scholarly or not.
Apparently not yet. So I haven't heard of it yet. So I don't know.
Yeah, basically they attribute it to native First Nations peoples.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the civilization. I mean, there were civilizations pretty early in the Americas, but I haven't heard of that one.
Okay,
The Canadian one, no. Yeah.
well, it becomes scholarly, I guess.
So
Before I get excited.
Well, no, things are no. That's the beauty of being an archaeologist is that we have to always be humble. That's a joke there. No, because every time we think that we know it all, somebody goes, "Hey, look what we just discovered," and our theory goes down the tubes. That's like, that's the reality. It's like, we do all this work, we find all these things, we think we know, and then somebody in the trenches discovers something that predates it, a whole other civilization, and then we have to reassess, spin around. That's just what's the word for when you're doing the driving and it has to calibrate? What's that called? That's what I have to do all the time, with archaeology. They're always discovering something new. We got another question here. There's a story.
Polytropos? Is that the word? Polytropos? Is that the word you were looking for?
No, not that one. That's a good one, though. I was thinking about like re-engaging or something. I don't know.
Well, that makes it more interesting to me. Makes our archaeology more interesting.
Well, that to me is always an adventure. It's always, I agree, Darren. It's always something that, we don't know it all, but we could always, we were the first ones to discover something. And I wrote a book that concerns a discovery that was brand new. I discovered. And that is what is exciting about it, is that every time you do an excavation, you will discover something that's never been seen.
Yeah.
Every day, you'll discover a coin, a pottery shard, part of a wall, a sculpture, but you will discover something, and sometimes that discovery changes the world. And that's what makes it exciting. Every day is an adventure. Yeah. So it's worth it. It's worth doing it. It's also, of course, archaeology is not only just the digging, it's the researching afterwards, assessing the evidence, going through and making these connections. And all of a sudden you have this aha moment, like, wow, this is connected to this place way far away. And they had, huh? Yeah, because it's like you discover, because you realize that when people trade, you find bits and pieces of these trade items. You go, wait a minute, they're trading 1,000 miles away. How in the world did this get here?
Yeah, exactly.
It's exciting. So for me,
So I put a link to the discovery.
Okay.
It's on some island off of British Columbia, and it's referring to the Heightened people who were supposedly there during the Ice Age. They managed to survive the Ice Age on this island.
Oh, that's cool. That's pretty great.
That's what they're saying, and there's like a whole article on it.
So it's just 1,000 years older than Giza pyramids. So it's from the 4,000s. So it's a pretty old.
Wow.
I guess the ocean was frozen over and food resources were dwindling, but they found this island where they could survive in British Columbia.
That is cool. Well, it looks like a village, so it sounds like it could be plausible. So got to keep an open mind. It always do.
Yeah, they got pictures and video and everything.
10,000 years before Giza, would that be like 12,000 BC?
So that would be during of course, the Young Dryas.
Younger Dryas.
9,000. So this is before the Young Dryas. So so we're looking at something that survived. But
okay, that's right. Younger Dryas is like 12 before present. The
Yes.
before present thing throws me off so much.
Yeah, the BP, I know. It always threw me off too. It's like BP before your present time, and you have to immediately take out 2,000 years. I know. I've done that too. I'm going, looking at that going, my eyes kind of blink. I'm like, wait a second, it's BP. It's not BCE. Yeah. People like doing that. That's good. Yeah. Julian says there's a story of Shamir worm that splits rock. The demons told Solomon about the Shamir worm. He needed a way of doing so without iron, as iron is used in war, but temple was a place of peace. So you can't use iron. You have to use some other way to cut the stone. Okay, got it. So, king of demons. Gosh, but no, not all the demons, right? Okay, yeah, okay, yeah. So we have these multiple conversations going on here. Okay, I was quite intrigued. He says, Julian says, by the earlier comment on the shot that he comes on Shabbat. So I tried Googling Elijah Shabbat, but I can't find anything that really says anything about that. Says Julian, about the Elijah showing up at a Shabbat.
So that's in it's a Kabbalistic tradition, and so in let's see, like Eliyahu Hanavi is the song that's like traditionally sung on Shabbat, which comes from the Kabbalistic tradition out of Sfat from the Ari, is I believe the known origins of that tradition. If it dates further back than that, we don't know. Let's.
Yeah, the Orthodox follow that though too, right?
That's where like all of Judaism today is essentially derived from that tradition. That was, I want to say, like the 1600s or so.
Yeah. So I mean, you have that. I know that Orthodox will do that. Have that Elijah chair. That's there. So if you're Reformed, not necessarily, but or conservative, I know the Orthodox do that. So yeah, it's just sometimes it's so common.
Mostly Hasidic. The Hasidic community is the one who's very into the Kabbalistic traditions and has kept those alive for the most part.
Yeah,
like the Hasidic and Chabad is a great reference for stuff like that.
That Leonard Nimoy.
Leonard
Nimoy. He's Orthodox, you know that, right?
Yeah, that's the hand sign. That's the priestly gesture.
Right, the Shekinah. The Shekinah, right? Yeah.
Shekinah, the presence, yeah.
Presence of God. You got to, because Leonard Nimoy, who became Mr. Spock, peaked during a ritual. They're doing this.
And then Shekinah gets interpreted in Kabbalah, like specifically through like Moshe de Leon of Cordova in the Zohar, and where Shekinah is the divine feminine, and it's all about the interplay between the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and that is again the known origins of the tradition according to the traditional explanations. That goes all the way back to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the 2nd century CE. In Judaism, that it was an oral tradition that was kept alive, and that at that point it finally got written down.
That's great. Love hearing that. Going through the Shekinah, I've actually done some talks on the Shekinah, the presence of God, the indwelling presence. Of course, in English, they'll translate it as dwelt. It's like it dwelt with us. Okay, well there goes that. We lost that meaning. It's gone. He dwelt with us. Just dwelt.
There's so much depth of meaning in the original Hebrew that just gets lost in translation, especially because the translations into English of since Judaism was not primarily an English-speaking religion, or the people practitioners were not primarily English-speaking, the translations of the Torah that ended up coming into English were essentially taken from the original ones were taken from the King James translation. And so most of our translations are derivative from from Christian translations. I believe there's like the New Jerusalem Standard Bible, which is a good translation that's independent of that if you're looking for a translation of the Tanakh that doesn't have as much Christian influence, but it's really hard to separate what comes from the Christian tradition is retro projected back onto Judaism from that with what is original to Judaism without going into like the original language and like all the history and archaeology.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the Hebrew Bible has been Christianized to become the Old Testament via its translation. They do have a lot of dependence also on the Septuagint as well. Going through that. So
the Septuagint is great because we kind of lost some Hebrew meaning, and as far as our understanding of Hebrew was pretty much reconstructed during the rabbinical period of the Mishnah Talmud, which is like again 2nd century, and so the Septuagint dating back to the 4th century BC gives us a older glimpse into how
the languages
Hebrew was translated into Greek, and since we've got a very firm grasp on the Greek meanings, the Septuagint is a great window into older Hebrew meanings than some of the later rabbinic traditions, even, which is super interesting.
Well, yeah, it's more detailed oriented, and it captures those words like bug and amber for us to understand how it was at that time. You may not. I'm not sure if you know this, Ali. My father was one of the translators of the New American Standard Bible, which is the 3rd largest English Bible in the world, and it became the Bible used by U.S. presidents for quotations whenever up until Obama. Obama did it, and the next guy didn't do it after that. So, but Obama quoted from my dad's Bible. Interesting, cool, huh? Anyway. What happened is that they're part of the Hebrew Bible translation. They went through, and they use the Septuagint, and they got to this place where they're going, we have no idea what this Hebrew is, and they're all open up the Septuagint. They're like going through, going, okay, there it is. Okay, we figured out. There's kind of
cool. I know what this Greek word means.
We know what this Greek word means. So let's go there, because Hebrew is so it's context driven in many cases, as you know. If you know Hebrew, I'm sure real well, and so there's a context that's important. It's like vague, like English. Sorry, but Greek is so specific. It's amazing. Greek is a great language. So they really can capture the nuances of that time. Because you got more words, like Mozart, too many notes. So, you got too many words for Greek, but that's great when it comes to, so the Septuagint is actually fun to read. The Hebrew, you're kind of going, okay, we're getting it. We're getting the mystical meaning, but it can be a challenge. So, hats off to you to go through the Hebrew and understand the full depth of it. I'm
trying to learn Hebrew and Greek, and Sanskrit has recently come up but at least it's super similar. Like Greek is like, oh cool, Sanskrit, I know that word from Greek, like maha, that's like magna, cool, matrika, that's mater, okay, cool, we got that, try, that's exact same word, equos, hippos, like cool, we're on point with horses.
And they're all Indo-European.
Proto-Indo-European. It's like clear. It's so clear. The apparent, there's no way that they did come from the same language.
But people will claim they're separate. Yeah. It's ridiculous. The roots are all the same. Julian says, I heard that Sanskrit has 22 letters, just as Hebrew has 22. Is that true?
I've not learned enough Sanskrit to comment on this. I know Hebrew has 22 letters. I could name them for you, but I don't know about the Sanskrit yet.
Yeah, I
want to say that Sanskrit has more sounds, more letters than that, and it's divided. Like I know that there's a difference between vowels and consonants, and then there's some combinations where it's like where it's phonemes that we would separate into individual letters, but they're like one letter in Sanskrit, and it's definitely a little bit different with regards to that.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I don't know Sanskrit. I'm sorry. I never got to it. I think it'd be worth knowing. Absolutely, I would like to know Sanskrit. Maybe I'll do that someday. I want to go to India too. So I mean, that's a goal. But yeah, just for me, it's just Greek and Latin. Arabic, obviously Syriac, Aramaic, and German and French. But my Hebrew is pretty poor. I'm sorry. So Allie, you're better.
I'm very low on my Hebrew. But I'm getting better, and it's good. I'm picking up on it quick. I've started reading I found a cool translingual Bible on YouTube where it does a verse in English and then Hebrew, and it's got the text in Hebrew, so I'm able to follow along with the Hebrew text and then get the meaning from the English. And so then when it's repeating in Hebrew, it's like, oh, cool, I'm picking up on that word.
Yeah, it's not an easy language to learn, that's for sure. So once again, Syriac wasn't easy for me either, which is also connected to Aramaic.
What's the deal? How old is Syriac? Is Syriac's older than Aramaic? Correct? Is that?
Yes. Well, actually, it's hard. That's a hard question. So Aramaic can be earlier, and then Syriac comes out of that as a derivative. So Aramaic was the international language of the Persian Empire. But it was being slowly replaced by Greek, by the way. But what happens is that there's a local variant that in Syria of Aramaic, that's Syriac. So it's a local variant, and that's mostly used. It becomes quite a bit used in the second, third, and fourth and fifth centuries. The Syriac, Peshitta, and a few other works. A lot of them are religious oriented. So the question is, how far back it goes, and scholars still have a debate on that. So
I wonder if Dorotheus of Sidon was originally in Syriac. I've heard that the original. So we have his Carmengia of Astrology in the Arabic that has survived, and the theory that I've heard is that it survived in the Arabic, was translated from Greek, but especially with you just saying that and thinking about the area and the time frame, I wonder, Syriac would almost make sense if that was originally in Syriac. Middle Persian is also proposed as a language.
Yeah, I'm also thinking maybe that's the language of Lucina Samosata.
I'm sorry, Middle Persian is later. It later went through. That's right, because it came into Arabic from Middle Persian, and the idea is that it came from Greek before that, but who's to say that? I'm not convinced that it's not something else.
Yeah, I don't know.
We like to give the Greeks credits for everything.
yeah. Like I said, Lucina Samosata, I'm thinking, he writes a work on the Syrian goddess, and he writes it in a Greek dialect. That's a Syrian dialect of Greek, and I'm wondering if his original language would be probably Syriac. Lucina.
Yeah, and that got translated into Greek because that was the common
But if you read, he intentionally wrote this work to have a Syrian accent to it in the Greek. It's pretty incredible. And
I'll have to check that out. It's by Lucian.
It's called the Syrian Goddess. You'll love it.
The Syrian Goddess.
Yes, and it's worth going through, but it makes you scratch your head. And I think obviously he would be speaking Syriac. It could be, because obviously people say it's Arabic. But maybe it's Syriac. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Who knows? I mean, it's Samosata, so I don't know.
So when are you going back to Anatolia to dig up more stuff on Hecate?
I don't know. I want to go back soon. I mean, I had an offer to go back this summer again. Actually, offered to go back in July. So I'll see what happens. So yeah, but I want to go back soon. So yeah, which none of you know about. I've been busy.
I want more info on Hecate.
Yeah, which means I wouldn't be doing talks in July, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. So
that's so exciting. Best excuse to miss a lecture ever.
So, but I don't know yet. So we're just playing by ear.
I'll keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd like to go. So I haven't invited. So have been invited. The real question, I got to get my passport though. I'm kind of, there's a few other little things I got to do.
Passport anyway. Go get your damn passport.
I know to get a passport.
Well, hopefully that pans out if Dionysus wills it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I need to bring my artifacts. The only thing I have with me is a lithograph, but Ellie, like my artifacts, that's for sure. So,
I'd love to check it out. Can I share my altar to Hecate with you? A picture of it?
Yeah, sure. You can share it. Yeah, I see another question. Julian says, "Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt the discussion." No. When you said that we have many discussions going on here, no, all good. It's hard to judge the right moment to press enter. No, it's all good, but is often influenced. But I have several thoughts and I can't remember them without entering earlier ones. No, it's all good. No, all good. I'm happy that you're asking these questions. I'm used to the multiple conversations, and I like multiple conversations because my brain is twisted like that and likes going all different. I'm like a lizard. My eyes go like all different directions, and that's the way my conversations go. The lizard eyes that go like this. That's how my conversations go. Yeah, all good. All good. Thanks. Sorry also to interrupt. Just as you were saying about language and roots, would it be great to hear what you're going to say? Oh, no, it's all good. All I said was Indo-European all has the same roots, whether it be, even with father, mother, water. I mean, you just have these basic words. Yeah. Ellie says, sorry if I talk too much. I did. No, you don't. You're fine. Everybody's fine. Yeah, you're all good. We love you all. We like talking. That's what we're here. We're here to celebrate and have conversations. That's the whole point of this time together, is to have
father in Sanskrit is baba.
Baba.
Which connects to it's actually really close to the Hebrew. It seems to me closer to the Abba. Than to pater.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned with Peter and the worship, and it struck me that Peter's name and pater, and that Peter was being worshipped in place of the what was the word for it? The great father, the ancestral father.
So what they did? Well, not that, but basically what happened is Peter and Paul were being worshipped instead of that's right, pater familias. So I mean, maybe there's a little bit of interesting there, but Christian worship when it comes to the feast days of saints, it literally comes out of the Ancestor Veneration of the Romans. It's a refrigerium of the Romans dedicated to the dead. So there's a direct connection there.
I've always heard the etymology for Peter is related to rock, and on this rock I shall build the church. ... But
did you know?
But the father, because he's also considered the father of the church, and in Latin, of course, Peter. Sorry, go on.
Did you know that the word Peter is on this rock I shall build my church, and in Greek it's the word Petra.
Petros.
Petra.
Petra. Okay.
Petra.
The feminine.
And in Latin, it's Petrus.
Okay.
So Petra, however, does not mean rock. It means a pebble, a fragment, something that's cut off something else.
Huh.
But Petros means a rock, a stone, a foundation. But since it's written originally in Greek, it says, upon this rock I will build my church. It's not a power word. It's upon this humble foundation. Look at Peter. Upon this human who has all these vulnerabilities, I will even build my church, and the gates of hell will not stay. It's an image that glorifies God and Christ, and that says even humble Peter. But when it goes into Latin, it's Petros, upon this rock. And then Peter gets the big head.
That makes so much sense. I've heard it as that it was an ironic nickname, similarly to the way that you might call someone who's really huge tiny, because Peter is so wishy-washy and all over the place. His nickname was, but with it being pebble and a fragment, that makes sense in an unironic way.
Yeah. So when we're going through that, one of my classes, I had them look it up in the Greek lexicon. I'm going, they're all, no, it must mean strong rock. I said, look at the Greek in the lexicon. They looked it up. They're like, oh, okay. It's like, sorry, but it becomes the rock, and people interpret it that way. But that's not Peter's life. That's not him, doubting, the cock crows. I will not deny Christ. The cock crows, runs away at the crucifixion. I mean, it's not those. It's not. It's not exactly. Doesn't make any sense in a contextual sense. Oh, he's Peter. He's great. It's like, no, he's humble, human. He's frail. So it's emphasizing the power of God. And if you're Greek Orthodox, you are reading it that way. So if you're Catholic and you go, upon this rock, the Greek Orthodox are going, okay, pebble, the leadership comes from the Pope in this way, and the Orthodox or Greek Orthodox are, no, it doesn't. Not from our perspective, not from what we're reading there. What are you reading? Sorry, so there's a lot of power in translation. We have to be very careful about it. So, but the Latin Vulgate is full of problems. Rome nuts. Yes,
I've heard something about the Basilica of Peter. Of Peter, I believe, being connected to a temple of Kabili. Does that, like, that there used to be that in Rome where there was a temple to the Magna Mater is like a site that was later taken up in Christianity? I want to say like the St. Peter's Basilica potentially, although I'm not sure if that makes sense because that was like Nero's like racetrack, right?
Yeah, it was Nero's racetrack. Racetrap, boy, it's a trap. Star Wars. No, okay. It was Nero's racetrack, and then after that there are the hills. So what they used to do is they used to crucify and kill people in the racetrack, and then they bury them in the hill behind. That's the Vatican, and that's where they found early on, as early as the 2nd century. There's a mention of a shrine that's dedicated to Peter that was there, that was already being venerated. And we look at the archaeology, and there are already there's already a site there that seemed to go back to even the 1st century. So this is an early veneration spot, but it's the hills where they bury the criminals. It's the back hill, and of course they discovered it recently. But there are places. Was it the church? Was it St. Clement's in Rome? It's built above a Mithraeum, and I've actually been there. You go down. Is it Clements? I'm trying to remember the name of it. Anyway, Search of the Sea, and you go down, and there's an old Roman apartment complex underneath it, and then you go further down, and there's a Mithraeum, and it's all there. It's completely there, which is really cool. So it was a cult center before that. So anyway,
I've heard the connection with the keys specifically with Kabili's keys becoming the keys of the Pope later.
So I think I'm thinking about Santa Maria de Maggiore. Maybe that's where the Kibili site is. That's a good question. I'll have to look into that. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I don't think it was from a scholarly. I'm not sure if it was from a scholarly source, but that there was a Kibili site that was taken up by the Roman Church, and that has associations with the keys. That the keys of Peter are the same keys that were the keys of Kibili before.
That makes a lot of sense. There's, in fact, a large portion of churches are built on other sacred spots. So yeah, or heroes, sites dedicated to heroes as well. Jillian says, "Do we have anyone called Father Peter? We're always talking about petrol, by the way, of Petrus and so on. Wonder if any connections there too," says Jillian. "I suppose there's also the Spanish word Pedro, I think a generic term in films for someone you don't know the name of, but I could have misunderstood. I don't know. I'm sure there's a pater Petered out there somewhere, right? Peter picked the pepper. Okay, anyway, I'm losing the ability of something that's called speech, and the English language is being lost to me now. So I'm sorry. It's a good tongue twister. Yeah, I can't. I can't read anymore. So, but yeah, great questions, great ideas. Did you guys have fun? Right? Is this good? All right. All right. So I'm off. By how much, I'm not sure. So, have a great night. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm going off into the sunset, like the Mesopotamian and myths will have, up to the western horizon. Hopefully, I'm not.
Press the end button, and that'll do the same thing.
The end button's the same. So, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Night.
you.
Night.